We'll go ahead and get started with the invocation and our Pledge of Allegiance. Reverend Lori Walkie with Mayflower Congregational Church is here. I'll ask her to lead us in the invocation. Afterwards, I'll ask Councilman White if he'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. But would everybody please stand?
Will you join me in prayer? Tornadoes, earthquakes, sunshine, high winds, ice, snow, rain, a hard freeze, and a blood moon. What's next, God? We're a little afraid to ask. It's enough to make us think that nothing is under our control, but we know that isn't exactly true. Plenty is under our control. It's why we hold city council meetings. We are here to do the most good for as many of our neighbors as possible. Someone in here just snorted in disbelief, skeptical of the process. But we have faith, God. We have faith that the public good is the highest priority of our elected officials. Cynicism has no place in this room. Only hopes and dreams for a better city should live here. So with that in our hearts, we ask you to grant us the wisdom and courage that come from deep conversation and open minds. We'll need all the help we can get, God, and we trust you will provide. You tell us to take care of one another, every single other, so we will. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It is National Telecommunications Week, and we are going to take this opportunity to thank our 911 operators and our telecommunications emergency responders. If you guys would come on forward. David, bring up your group. We have a proclamation. I'll ask the clerk to read it as we get settled.
Whereas emergencies can occur at any time that require police, fire, or emergency medical services. Whereas when an emergency occurs, the prompt response of police officers and firefighters are dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from citizens who telephone the Oklahoma City Emergency Communications Center. Whereas public safety dispatchers and call takers are the first and most critical contact our citizens have with emergency services. Whereas by monitoring police by radio, public safety dispatchers are the single vital link for the officers. Critical information is provided to the officers in the field, and this helps to ensure their safety. Public safety dispatchers and call takers of the Oklahoma City Police Department have contributed substantially to the apprehension of criminals, suppression of fires, and treatment of patients. Whereas each public safety dispatcher and call taker has exhibited compassion, understanding, and professionalism during the performance of their job in the last year. Whereas public safety dispatchers and call takers are at their best helping others through the worst situations imaginable. Whereas public safety dispatchers and call takers save lives and change lives one call at a time. Now therefore, Mick Cornett, the mayor of the city of Oklahoma City, does hereby proclaim April 13th through 19th, 2014 as National Telecommunications Week in Oklahoma City.
Let's show our appreciation to our communications experts. David, we're very grateful for the men and women who serve in the communications department.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council, for this recognition. It's such an honor to work with such a great group of public safety professionals. I've been in the industry now for almost 41 years, and these folks are very committed to providing excellent service to this community. Thank you so much.
Well, it is great to see some faces behind the scenes because I know our citizens have relied on your work and your calm heads many, many times. Let's show our appreciation one more time. And National Telecommunications Week. Thank you very much. Thanks so much for what you do. Thanks very much. All right, on the agenda, item 3, Office of the Mayor, we have an appointment to the Oklahoma City Riverfront Redevelopment Authority. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. The Journal of Council Proceedings is item 4. Item 4A is to receive the journal for April 8th, and item 4B is to approve the journal for April 1st. All right, comments or questions on the journal? Cast your votes then. And it passes unanimously. And then item 5 is a request for uncontested continuances.
Mayor, in addition to item 8A1, which is listed in the agenda as being deferred until April 29th, I've got a couple of others on page 8. Under item 8D1, item B, 3208 North Ollie, we ask that that be stricken. We need to re-notify. And then moving to item 8E1, item C, 5806 North Vermont, we ask that that be stricken. The owner has removed. Item J, 2728 Southwest 42nd Street. We ask that that be stricken. The owner has secured. And item K, 3213 Northwest 62nd Street. We ask that that be stricken. The owner has secured.
All right, so if anyone showed up for item 8A1, that one has been deferred until April 29th. Otherwise, we are set to move ahead. We'll recess the council meeting, convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority. There are 3 items. How about a motion on the MFA? Comments or questions here? All right, cast your votes. It passes unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCMFA, convene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority, where there are 2 items. Okay, comments or questions on the PPA?
Mayor Dan Langford is here from the Gulf, from Early Wine, and Rob Lewis from Parks Department.
Appreciate it. Thank you all for being here today. I guess get the weather to settle down. You guys should have a good spring. All right, we have a motion on the PPA? Yes. Okay, cast your votes. It passes unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCPPA, convene as the Oklahoma City Environmental Assistance Trust. 2 items. All right. Comments or questions on the EAT? Cast your votes then. And it passes unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCEAT and reconvene the council meeting with the consent docket. Are there any individual considerations?
Your Honor, I'd like to make a comment. I asked a couple of questions, and the fire chief's gotten back to me on one I was most concerned about, and that was item 6A, new computer system for fuels management, and it's consistent with what the auditors have recommended the fire department do. And I have a strong feeling that probably in the first year or so we will not see an improvement in efficiency or reduction in prices, just because a new computer system takes some little difficulty, some time to get accustomed to. And they were going to wave a magic wand at their truck, and it was going to automatically tell them what kind of fuel requirements it had. So I'm a little suspicious of those kind of things. Anyway, it's consistent with what the auditors recommended, and every other city department is using a computer-driven fuels management program. So this is a project that will be very convenient for the fire department and hopefully pay dividends in the long haul, but don't expect anything short haul.
As we discussed yesterday, there's a trade-off. Sometimes you get the efficiencies, but having the audit tracks and following their recommendations is always a good idea.
Meg?
And Mayor, if I could just mention 6L, not to be redundant, Pete and I have both talked about this on a number of occasions, but for those citizens that are directly concerned and are interested, I just wanted to make note that this item awards a contract to MTZ Construction for the additional drainage inlets at Northwest 4th and Walker, Northwest 10th and Dewey, Northwest 7th and Santa Fe, and Southwest 12th and South Walker, all of which are areas that have experienced extreme flooding during even fairly minor rainstorms. And so we're hoping we can get this work done before we get into big rain season.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on the consent docket? All right, cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Nothing on the concurrence today, so we're on to item 8. These are items that require a separate vote. Item 8A1 has been deferred until April 29th. Item 8A1 deferred until April 29th. Item 8A2 is a Ward 8 zoning issue at 14200 Macaulay Boulevard. It's currently in plan unit development, and if approved, would be a new PUD. Pat?
Thank you, Your Honor. This project is not as simple as it might appear, and David Box is here to explain what's happening out there. It's a piece of property that's not been zoned. I mean, it's been zoned a long time, but not developed because of the geographic area, and it is adjacent to a very active subdivision in Ward 8, Remington.
Good morning. David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. This is a piece of property that's just under 12 acres that was zoned sometime in the early 80s, PUD 115A, and it has remained undeveloped for years and years, primarily because the only way to access it would be from Memorial through Macaulay, but then there's a large creek that runs through here, so it took a bridge and some creative engineering with the Corps of Engineers to make it accessible. Mr. Johnson is the engineer on the project, and he can answer any questions on that, but we have found a way to get to it, and so our development is for a nursing home and rehab facility. Don Greiner is here, and I'm going to have him address the concept for this particular piece of property.
Thank you, David. My name is Don Greiner, 709 Foxtail Drive in Edmond, Oklahoma. I'm the president of Grace Living Centers here in Oklahoma City, and we operate 25 nursing homes across the state, including several here in Oklahoma City. And we have a home on Wilshire right now, Wilshire and Broadway Extension, that was built in the 1950s that needs to be replaced. So we have this land under contract. It's just north of across the Kilpatrick from Mercy Hospital, and the plan is to build a new concept here, which is it's going to be all private rooms, and it's going to be broken into individual households of 14 residents per household, and each household is going to look like a home. The concept here is to create a residential community rather than a large institutional, traditional nursing home. They are going to be connected in the back, but each one's going to look like a home with 14 private rooms, private bathroom. The rooms will be large enough for a family member. Primarily, it's a rehab home where you come out of the hospital maybe with a hip fracture. You need physical therapy then before you go home. And we want to create enough room in the rooms for a loved one to come and stay like you would with a fold-out couch, when your wife has a baby in the hospital and you stay overnight. It's going to be similar to that. So large enough rooms for a family member to stay, then a private bath and private shower in each room. And it'll be a total of 98 rooms, 7 households of 14 each. That's the concept, and I'm happy to take any questions.
All right. Are there any questions? Pat, you want to make a motion?
I would move approval.
Second.
All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously.
And I do need to address real quick, and I apologize, TE number 4, we would ask that be removed. We're going to need that 5 foot on the north end to create our wall to screen the neighbors to the north.
You want to amend it as such?
Amended as such to eliminate TE4. I do move it that.
All right, do we have a second on that? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously.
Thank you.
All right, item 8A3 is a zoning case in Ward 7 at 226 Northeast 10th Street. It's currently a plan unit development and would be a new PUD if approved. John?
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This particular PUD deals with the new GE facility. And Tim, I'm going to turn it over at this time to Tim Johnson. I also see Kathy O'Connor here as well.
Thank you. Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates on behalf of the applicant, which in this case is Okura. Ms. O'Connor's here, and there are some representatives from GE that are here as well. Just simply put, this is a PUD that consolidates several pieces of land and sets it up to be very specific for the uses that GE is proposing on this site. Planning Commission approved it. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions.
All right, I move for approval, and then I want to bring forth another motion for the emergency.
Second.
All right. Are there any comments or questions or anyone here to speak about this item today? All right, cast your votes. It passed unanimously.
All right, and I move for the emergency.
Second.
Cast your votes. The emergency passes 9-0. Item 8A4 is a zoning case in Ward 6 at 1724 Northwest 4th Street. It's currently I-2 moderate industrial, and it would become a new simplified plan unit development. Meg?
Thank you, Mayor. This is another important project going forward today. Paul Lefebvre's here, I think, to speak. And Dan, did you want to come forward as well and tell us a little bit about the project? While Dan and Paul are coming forward, I do want to say that there have been a series of neighborhood meetings to address this issue. Most of you know that this is the property that has been developed as what we call the Westtown Campus, providing both a day shelter and a resource center for our homeless population in Oklahoma City. Dan and his Homeless Alliance have been working very hard to try to rehouse as many of the chronically homeless as possible through a program called 100,000 Homes. We've been extremely successful, but are having some trouble finding locations to house people. And so this project brought forward today will develop 20 single unit residency apartments on the property currently owned by the Homeless Alliance. I probably took your whole story, Dan, sorry.
Paul Lefebvre, 522 Colcord. Dan Strong, 4316 Spyglass Drive in Norman. And as the councilwoman stated, this is to enlarge the campus at Northwest 4th in Virginia. It will allow the construction of a 20-unit single-occupancy group home, and we feel this is a very important step for the Homeless Alliance and for Oklahoma City. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, Pat?
I have a question. This is to Dan primarily. When this project was originally put forward, the West End system bill out there was a commitment made, at least verbally, that there would be no residential facilities.
That it wouldn't be an overnight facility, that's correct.
And these are not overnight facilities?
These are.
So what happens to the commitment that was made that King's X is all over with?
Well, that commitment was made 7 years ago. Times have changed. Community needs have changed. How we address homelessness in Oklahoma City has changed.
And there was no other location that you could use?
There's nothing really special about this location except that it is on the campus, and the 20 people that will be housed there are high barrier, chronically homeless, medically vulnerable clients of the 100,000 Homes program. And the proximity of services is what makes this location the most attractive.
The only thing that concerns me is the commitment that was made 7 years ago, or however long ago it was, that there would be no housing at this facility. And I don't object to the project, but it's the process that it seems like we're damaging, and that when people make a commitment, we ought to go forward with that commitment.
Pat, this may be a little bit technical, but I think, and I wasn't here 7 years ago, maybe I was when we first started the project. I don't think so.
You weren't, but I was.
When we first started the
That
project.
commitment was made to the neighborhood not to build a shelter there, not to build an overnight shelter like Grace or Jesus House. This isn't a shelter. This is housing. These are small apartments.
I think we may be splitting hairs at that point, but I'll...
And that was going to be my comment exactly, that people aren't going to be sleeping in the shelter as an overnight shelter. They are going to be living in residences. And I guess my further comment would be that Dan and his team have worked so closely with the neighborhood that we had no protesters at the Planning Commission, and I don't believe we have anybody here today signed up to speak. So I think all of the concerns of the neighborhood, if there were, have been addressed to the satisfaction of the neighbors.
Our policy is that if we make a commitment, it's no longer valid, rather, if we can get everybody to agree to breaking it. So a commitment made up here has no value then, if that works. Is that the bottom line of what we're saying?
I don't think so, Pat. I think, we met with the neighborhood and we made an agreement, and now we've met with the neighborhood and said things have changed. Are you okay with this? And for the most part, the
Based on
neighborhood
what
has
the
said
circumstances
okay.
are at the moment, then.
Say it again.
A commitment made is based, following through on that commitment is subject to what's happened today, rather, if it was made yesterday.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Your Honor. On a chance to vent, that's all.
I don't think that's any different than any other commitment that we make. I mean, we all know that whatever we do here on a Tuesday is binding that day, and next week we could change that. I mean, anybody that's been around here very long understands that change is something that's constant in government, and it's especially constant in zoning cases. Otherwise, I mean, we just went through a series of changes in zoning cases where we changed attitude and where we changed uses. This is not unusual, Pat. I think it's it sends the wrong message to couch it in terms of some kind of disconnect between the truth and what we do here. I don't think that's it at all.
Well, one of the basis of that zoning change that we made several years ago was a commitment that there would be no housing in this area.
Well, that's why we come back through this process, and that's why they went back to the neighborhoods to talk to them about it. My guess is if the neighbors were opposed to that and had protested loudly enough at the meetings, we wouldn't be here. I mean, I think that's I mean, I'm beating a dead horse, I mean, because we're going to vote for it, and I'm going to vote for it, but I think it's a little bit disingenuous, and excuse me, I don't mean that to be a personal dig, but I just don't think it's fair to the process to couch it as somehow we're breaking our word, because I don't believe we are.
We are. And it wasn't part of the zoning ordinance.
If that were true,
it was a commitment
we'd still have slavery. I mean, the Constitution of the United States incorporates, I mean...
That's entirely different.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
We change all the time.
We made a commitment.
Changes.
We made a zoning change based on the commitment that was made to the public at that time. And we're backing away from that commitment. I don't have any problem with it, but I want people to understand that circumstances do change and commitments are no longer valid. So if you get a commitment from the city council, don't pay any attention to it until you come up next time.
Well, that's not the way you put it, so I guess maybe I'm splitting hairs with you then over how you phrased it. So,
If I may, we would submit that we have earned some considerable trust from the neighbors who were originally concerned about what was to happen in their neighborhood.
Oh, I'm not. The facilities work wonderfully well. I have no problem with that. I think the homeless need some attention. I'm just concerned about the fact that when this zoning change was originally made, when the project was originally approved, there was a commitment to the public there would be no housing there. And I think it's wonderful that it's there. I have no problem with it. The work Dan's done has been tremendous out there. It's been very valuable having a one-shops place to get all these services. I think that's really important. But I do think it's important to call people's attention to the fact that we are backing away from that, for good reason perhaps. We are backing away from the commitment that was made.
We are going back through the process, yes, sir, and requesting permission.
I would move approval.
Second. All right, cast your votes. And it passes unanimously. Item 8B is a zoning case that was recommended for denial at Planning Commission. The address is 100 Northwest 22nd Street. It's currently an HP Historic Preservation District, and it would become a new simplified planning and development district. And we have a few people that have signed up to speak, so why don't we hear from them first. Sherry L. Pemberton.
My name is Sherry Pemberton.
Good morning.
Good morning. I live at 110 Northwest 22nd Street in Oklahoma City. The property that is just to the west of the proposed property. I just have a few things to say. We've spoken on this issue, and here we are speaking again against it. So I'm trying to figure out what haven't we said here. They've put the address 100 Northwest 22nd Street on the papers, It's not just one property, it's 3 properties we're talking about. We're talking about 100 Northwest 22nd Street, we're talking about 104 Northwest 22nd Street, and we're talking about 2215 North Broadway, a nice corner there. So it's 3 properties, and we need to bear in mind that that's 3, not just one. Mr. White has a good point. Change happens. It happens all the time. And if it's for the good, then we should allow it to happen. This is not a good change. I feel like the plan was just put together and presented wrong. It's not a good plan. My name, even though my retaining wall is on the plans, it's shown on the plans, and they're going to build on top of it, my 10 feet to the east of that retaining wall is on the plan, and they plan to build right on top of that. My name is not on the 300-foot ownership radius report. I never received notice of this meeting and the agenda until Debbie Blackburn called me. It's incomplete and it's unacceptable. I think another thing we need to remember is that everybody says, well, nothing's been put back on that property, so you can't build anything on a vacant piece of land. Well, isn't that what it's all about? This would be changed for the good. We've just gone through a recession. The whole nation has just gone through a recession. Ours here in Oklahoma wasn't as bad, but we did go through a recession. I'm seeing people start to come out and invest in things and build things and encourage advancement of Oklahoma City. But just because it hasn't been done right now doesn't mean it isn't going to happen on those properties. We can still acquire investors who aren't looking at their own pocket and who really are concerned about the investment in Oklahoma City, in the historic part of Oklahoma City. I'm concerned about the property owner's responsibilities in this. We have been made to be the soldiers for that area when over and over and over again, this man has offered this property for commercial property again and again. It's not commercial property. To me, that's fraud. That's legal fraud. And he's allowed over and over and over again to do this. My neighbor next door went over and cleaned off his property, the 3 lots. He chopped down some branches that were sort of impeding our vision for safety. He cleaned up the leaves. He cleaned up the trash. We are being responsible for this owner's properties. We want the property. But obviously, this owner doesn't want this property to be what it is. I'm a little concerned about your language on the emergency ordinance. Whereas it being immediately necessary for the preservation of the peace, health, safety, and public good of Oklahoma City, really? A med spa is for the peace, health, safety, and public good of Oklahoma City? I don't deny this woman's right to build and develop her own business. I think it's great business. Just doesn't belong where she wants to put it.
All right. Sherry, thank you.
Thank you.
Debbie Blackburn?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to let the President of the Neighborhood Association.
Okay. Randy Ice?
Yes, I'm Randy Ice. I'm president of the Neighborhood Association, I guess next on your list. You all received a letter from me, and I'll keep my comments brief because my letter should speak for itself. This was overwhelmingly turned down by planning and HP. This is a problem piece of property, as you see from the pictures. It's in the HP. The park was put in the HP. This was well thought out back in the 90s when this was done, and this would be precedent setting to pull property out of an HP district, tear down a historic house, and redevelop this property. The park is supported by the neighborhood. We've adopted the park, and the park is also very historic, and we're trying to preserve that by maintaining a connection with the residential frontage there. There are 7 other residential single-family homes between 19th and 22nd that face this park. These people have relied upon this ordinance, as is our entire neighborhood. And to go back on this HP ordinance impacts all of us. It impacts the property rights of the rest of the neighborhood. I cannot tell you how important the HP ordinance has been to our property values. And if we start nibbling away at the edges, where do we stop? And that's the fear, and that will cause the value of the HP designations to be diminished.
All right.
Any questions on my letter?
Not at this time, Randy, but we may bring you back up at the end. Thank you. Jerry Monier?
Mr. Mayor.
Good
My
morning.
name's Jerry Monier, and I live at 119 Northwest 21st. I've lived on 21st Street between Robinson and Broadway for 6 years, and the property under review is 1 street north and has been an eyesore the entire time I've lived in the neighborhood. It's had 2 dilapidated houses that were eventually demolished, and it has a 3rd house right now that appears to be abandoned. It's very attractive to vagrants, with evidence of drug and alcohol use. There's dirty syringes, empty bottles up and down Broadway, and several vacant lots are like that. Several neighbors have seen it used as a public urinal, and there's nothing about its current condition or use that's representative or respectful of the historical nature of our neighborhood. I don't believe, looking at the property where it is, that there's a real upside for someone to build a house on this property, because it's surrounded by commercial businesses and it's facing Broadway. Broadway has become a very busy street with direct access to downtown. This is one of the reasons I fully support the rezoning of this location. It's a great opportunity for revitalizing this corner and improving our neighborhood. The businesses are present all along Broadway Avenue at the corners of 22nd, 23rd. If you drive down there, you'll find that there are only 3 blocks along Broadway on the west side of Broadway with single-family homes, and some of them are still vacant. There's a total of 7 homes with only 3 actually facing Broadway. With this in mind, it appears the intent of the city planning was for commercial development all along Broadway and using the major thoroughfare to downtown. So I'm wondering if in the final stages of setting the historical preservation boundaries, these few properties along Broadway were included. But if there were no homes in those 3 blocks, would it have been commercial? I've heard the arguments from my neighbors who want to preserve the historical significance of our neighborhood, but I do not agree that the property has historical significance, and I do not agree that rezoning this property will allow encroachment of businesses into our historical neighborhoods. The project, as outlined by Mariposa, will actually help set a precedent, I believe, for future development along Broadway within the guidelines of the historical preservation. Mariposa Mentzba's outline of their building and the design of their facility was made to complement our neighborhood. They modified the exterior structure. They met with an architect that's familiar with building in historical neighborhoods. So I believe that they're trying to help build a buffer using this commercial property into our historical neighborhood. And I'm a resident also. I live within 600 feet of the proposed business. Again, I want to say I support the rezoning request to allow a beautiful building with maintained landscaping to replace a vacant building and a debris-ridden lot. I understand and respect the goal of historic preservation to protect the historical integrity of the homes in my neighborhood, including my own home. However, I don't believe that preserving the past should mean that we refuse to allow opportunities to invite new businesses along Broadway Avenue and vacant lots. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Jerry. David, are you representing the developer here? Okay.
Yes. David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. I want to make sure everybody has everything I handed out. You should have in front of you a rendering of the facility. The second page of that is a site plan. You should have a zoning map of the area. You should have a packet of support letters that were submitted to staff by various neighbors, and then you should have a series of pictures. I'm going to real briefly address the underlying zoning issues, and then I'm going to have Christy Moreau, who is one of the owners of Mariposa, address the council. One of the issues raised by the neighbors is that this would be precedent setting. Now, I don't agree whatsoever. If you look at the zoning map is riddled with commercial zoning up and down Broadway on the west side. There's only 3 blocks that are intact HP. Our block, the property south of us, says HP, but it's actually a commercial business that's operating there. I presume it's legally non-conforming, but it is not residential. There are several significant factors that not only limit, but in our opinion, prohibit this particular site from being redeveloped residentially. If you look at the packet of pictures, we start with a picture of the current site. And the homes are gone that were there. There is one structure left. It is abandoned. And it is worth noting my client is under contract to purchase this. So the bad deeds of the owner that may be perceived or real have nothing to do with my client. My client is simply trying to buy it. As you flip through these pictures, you see the state of the area. And as you get to the 4th picture, you start to see why we believe this won't be redeveloped residentially. This picture is taken from the front of the property. As you see, you're looking at 235. You're looking at the warehouses that sit behind Byron's Liquor. The next page is a picture of Byron's Liquor. As we get to the last 3 pages, this is the real reason that we do not believe it will be redeveloped residential. What you have directly across the street from us to the north is a piece of property that is zoned straight C4. As this council knows, straight C4 zoning is not given in this city anymore, and that's because it allows the most intense uses imaginable. So when you look across the street from this piece of property, you have a series of cash checking places and loan operators. That fact alone, we think, indicates that it won't be redeveloped residentially. Couple that with the fact that this is the first street as you come off of the Broadway extension. This has become a thoroughfare into downtown. It is a street that is traveled at a high rate of speed. Again, it limits the ability to be redeveloped residentially. The history of this property is actually really interesting. When you talk to people that were involved back when the HP overlay came in, this piece was not intended to be an HP. The gentleman that owns the property at the time looked at a map. It didn't include this piece. He left town, and by the time he had gotten back, there had been an amendment, and this piece was included. We don't think this was ever intended to be HP. We think that on Broadway like this, when you have these high-intense uses around you, limits that ability. So let's look at what opportunity we have. If you look at the rendering, the second page is the site plan. And what we're able to do through the SPUD that we filed is, 1, limit the amount of uses. 2, we can control the types of building materials. And 3, we can do things like landscaping and controlling access to ensure that this is compatible with the neighborhood. There was reference made that we plan on building on our neighbor to the west retaining wall. That is not accurate. What you have before you is simply a site plan to depict how we envision the site to be developed. We understand we can't go and build a fence on someone else's property. So when you look at the site plan, the advantages that this offers is we have significant landscaping to the west, we have significant landscaping on the north end, and what we do is cut access to 22nd Street. And as you know, there on Broadway, it's one way because of the fire station. So there would be no way that anybody leaving our site would be able to double back and go through the neighborhood. So we think we've provided something that will ensure stability for this site, have a nice buffer to the west, and allow for a quality development that otherwise is going to be a piece of property that will sit here vacant and undeveloped and become a problem. Now with that, I'm going to have Ms. Moreau get up here and explain her business and why they want to stay in the neighborhood.
Down. So some of us are down here. My name is Christy Moreau, and the address is 1907 North Broadway. I'm one of the managing partners of Mariposa Med Spa. And Mr. Box is correct. We are in the process of trying to purchase this property that is contingent on rezoning. I've made a few notes because I knew I'd be nervous. I've been working on this for a while. I want to introduce you a little bit to our business and to what our intent has always been for this property. Mariposa is truly an Oklahoma City small business success story, really. We were established in Midtown at 19th and Broadway in 2007. I was not a part of the original business. By 2008, of course, as they've already been mentioned, the recession kind of took a downturn, economy took a downturn, and the current owners were actually in the process of selling. And instead, we met, talked, changed management, changed a lot of the business structure, and I came on board with a small group. And since January of 2009, we've had significant growth despite the downturn in the economy. And I will be honest and tell you that my initial concern with this 19th and Broadway location was the location, because it's across from the factory, and I just thought, I don't even know if this is a good place for a medical spa in general. And the truth is, it's been an incredible location for us because of the ease of the location, getting to the location from all parts of the city, right there with the highway system. It's been phenomenal, actually. And there's been a lot of comments from patients about how easy it is to get to where we're located and how much they enjoy that. As far as how far we've come, we have been a Metro 50 award winner 3 years in a row, and for 2 of those years we were in the top 3. So that, to me, speaks to the fact that there's a need for what we do where we're located, or we wouldn't have been able to create that kind of success. We've been on the Inc. 500 list 2 years in a row, and for non-surgical aesthetic practices or medical spas, we're in the top 1% to 2% in the country, based on the volume of business that we do and that we've generated. And it all started at 19th and Broadway in Midtown, right here. We're very well known and respected in our industry, even though it may not be so much with everyone around the community. But with this kind of success comes the need for growth and expansion, and we're currently renting the space that we have at 19th and Broadway and are seeking now to build a facility that's truly a state-of-the-art facility that's representative of what we do and who we are. We have heard from many of our patients that they want us to stay where we are. They like the ease of our location. They don't want us to move out of the revitalized urban area up to the suburbs of North Oklahoma City and Edmond, which is where most of our competitors are. And so we're trying to honor the wishes of our clients and what they want and where our success has stemmed from. I would like to say, too, that with all of the urban renewal that's currently going on, all of the new Bricktown residences, all the revitalization of Midtown, there are no other facilities like ours offering the services that we offer to new residents of downtown and Midtown. And that's another reason why we would really like to stay. We don't want to go where the masses are and where all the competitors are. We want to stay where and honor the people that have made us successful. I do want to make the point, David pointed out that, I was not involved in letting the former houses dilapidate, and that was way before I became any part of this. But I knew from the very beginning that this property was zoned for residential purposes. In no way were we misled to that point. We knew that it would require a rezoning, and we knew that rezoning would be a little controversial with the HP issue. And we actually made every attempt to honor and stay within those guidelines. And I do want to take a minute and explain why we weren't able to do that, because I want to make sure that the council understands it was not our intent to create a big controversy over that at all. We have a lot of respect for our community. We've been there for 7 years, and we've always gotten along with the neighbors where we currently are. And, just to our west is HP already. And we've done just fine right there. We really wanted to create a facility that would enhance that corner. We drive past that all the time, and while it may not be great for a lot of commercial uses, it really actually is quite good for us. And I think that we can do it in a way that will stay true to the historic integrity of that neighborhood. When we first looked at this and approached this, I asked, who is an architect that is very familiar with HP and with the homes that are there? I wanted our structure to look more residential, even though the use is commercial, because I wanted to respect that part of the neighborhood. I think that even the staff report to the Planning Commission mentioned on at least 2 occasions that commercial development may be appropriate at this location, provided that the design was keeping with the character of the area, and we have every intent to do that. If that particular drawing isn't completely to their liking, I'm more than happy, and I've made it very clear to them, I'm more than happy to continue to work on developing an exterior that they feel like is representative of Heritage Hills and Heritage Hills East homes. That's the mission I gave to the architect, is I want this to look historically appropriate for this area. I don't want something that doesn't look like it belongs right here. We want it to be beautifully landscaped. We truly wanted it to be a win-win for everybody, for the neighborhood, for the development along Broadway, and again for our business as well, to allow us to stay where we've already been building. I want you to understand that it was not our goal to have the HP designation have to be removed or anything. I went back to the architect and said, if these are the HP guidelines, is there any way we can create a site plan that would be within these? And I want to explain to you why we couldn't do it, because I don't want you to feel like it was purposeful from a negative context. The guidelines for the HP that they set out are obviously for residential homes, which have a front yard. And if we put our building where they wanted us to put it, we would have lost almost 1/3 of the property that we were purchasing as far as usable space. That limits the amount of parking, and it would have allowed us to not have enough parking for my staff and for the full occupancy of our building. So that we couldn't do it. We tried. I went back and had them create several site plans. We couldn't make it work. That's why we've had to do this the way we've done it. Not because we don't want a building that looks historically appropriate, or because we don't want, to fit in with our neighborhood, or we want to encroach. That has never been my intent at all. My intent was to add something of value to the neighborhood. I'm hoping still to collaborate further on the look of that and get something that I think at the end of the day, when it's done, that the neighbors might look at and say, you know what, this was okay. This actually did help me. This was beneficial. That's what my goal would be, and I want you to just understand where our intent is as a business. The last thing I want to say, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have for me, when I drive up and down Broadway, as I've done for the last 7 years, what I see are small businesses with owners that love the area, that have invested in that area, and they're committed to bringing great food, great fellowship venues, great products, and great services to a revived community of people who like the culture of an urban environment. And we're currently one of those businesses. We're not somebody new trying to come in and make a big, massive change. We just want to stay where we are and do what we do and continue to serve the clients that we have. So really what I'm just asking you is to understand what our goals are, what the heart for this project has been, and to vote yes so that we can stay in the Midtown downtown area and continue to serve the people.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of real quick points, and she alluded to them. One of the important things is when we sat down with the neighbors, they didn't like the design of the building, and we said, you guys design it. We wanted to work with them, and we were told under no uncertain terms, the answer is no, we'll fight you all along the way. So we've tried to do everything we can to work with them and allow them to design our building that would be in a manner that would be keeping with their desires. But it is worth noting, like Christy said, that the staff report talks about commercial may be appropriate. And when you look at other historic areas, it's not uncommon for there to be commercial abutting the HP areas. If you look at Western, as you drive north through Crown Heights, what you see is commercial on both sides of Western. So this isn't something that would be presidential. This is something that would be in keeping with other historic areas in the city. And we would ask for your approval. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, David. We have a couple of other people that have signed up that have just recently sent their card in. Shannon Rundell.
Hi.
Morning.
I am here for the Historic Preservation Alliance, all 9 of your HP neighborhoods. You are knowing us now. And all 9 do abut commercial. This would be the very first time rezoning had been allowed to come into an HP district. There was a property, I think, near Crown Heights that was left out of the HP zoning. It's the one behind VZD, and the Crown Heights people, you know, they can do nothing about that. But all of the HP neighborhoods believe that this is really a very old conversation. When the neighborhoods were formed, the people who bought in historic preservation districts did so for the protection of the zoning. Not because we loved old houses so much, but because we felt like it was going to be a secure urban neighborhood. And a lot of us have been there for many years, as you know, and we think that this, just allowing this precedent, would affect all 9 neighborhoods down the road, and we can't really get that started. We suggested to this young woman, we support her business. We suggested other locations. 23rd Street's booming. I hope y'all came to Open Streets, because it is booming. There would be locations all the way over to, you know, down 23rd or down in Midtown. She was not responsive. So we really ask you to not allow this. Planning Commission, HP Commission have denied it. So we hope you will.
Okay, thanks, Shannon. Marva Floyd? Marva Ellard, I'm sorry, I misread
right,
you.
Mayor.
Yeah, sure.
Marva Ellard, 1521 North Chartel. I am a multifamily developer, and I just wanted to comment on Mr. Box's assertion that no residential would go on that site, and I will tell you that that is not accurate. The current owner hasn't been willing to sell it as a residential use and has pursued commercial sales only. I think it's a great site for residential development. It might be a multifamily development, but I do see it as a developable site. Mr. Ice most likely told you the record prices some of the very few vacant lots in Heritage Hills East are bringing at this time, and so there is great interest in living in our part of town. To be offered to design a property that you don't want to happen is really not an offer, and yes, we refuse to participate in the design process because we don't want a business use in that location. It's nothing, like Shannon said, it's nothing against the ownership of the spa. We welcome them, but not at that site. And as others have said, please deny this rezoning request. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Marva. Yeah, Debbie, you want to come up? May I? Yes.
I was going to spare you another speech by people, but I just listened to this and I feel like I have to speak. A lot of us who've lived on, and I lived on that block for 35 years, have a lot of sweat equity in these properties. And we have seen the per square footage escalate because we had protective ordinance, the HP, which when people buy those properties, and my husband and I have both worked on 3 old houses on that block to try to do our own little urban renewal project. We just sold one, and it sold for, per square footage, a price that my husband could not believe because of the protection of HP. The person that I sold it to, unfortunately, is very concerned right now. I'm surprised he's not here. He was supposed to be here today because he thought he was buying into an HP. He came from another HP and he bought into that area. The idea that this all along Broadway is commercial, as Mr. Box was telling you, it happened in the 60s when they thought that whole block, that whole 100 block they thought was going to go commercial right up to Heritage Hills. But it didn't. The city rezoned it with the idea that it would become commercial, but it did not. Those properties remained residential. And so the property he's talking about, C4, et cetera, those were oddities, and the rest of the properties remained residential. You heard a developer just tell you that these properties are developable. You can see the intense development that's going along 13th Street. You see houses now, new houses, being built right on the property line, right up next to Classen. Modern houses, brand new. This is imminently developable. We've got Caleb McCaleb that came out of Edmond and is now trying to buy up the few vacant lots we have in our neighborhood for development. And they are building on the most busy arterial streets possible, Classen and others. So the idea that this is not going to be developed is not right. I won't go into the sad saga of what we lived through to get to this point, but I will tell you that some of these people, the one person that I saw speak for this, would never have bought her house on 21st Street if she had seen it the way it was when we moved into that block. The thing that has been the saving grace for that neighborhood has been the HP. And this woman would not have wanted anything to do with how she purchased on 21st if we hadn't had that. This is going to impact 9 other neighborhoods. This sets a precedent. I have always operated by the principle that my rights end where yours begin and vice versa. And I think that our property rights are not going to count for anything, and somebody who has never had any commitment to the neighborhood is going to be gaining and setting a precedent that will just completely continue up the block, and Heritage Hills will find commercial development right on their doorstep. I ask you to please vote this down because it does affect more than just our neighborhoods. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Debbie.
Council.
Yeah. If you'll make it brief, I think we're ready to move on.
Mr. Box said that the property to the north of the lot he's looking at is zoned commercial. It's not. Only a portion of that block is. The rest is historical preservation. And it's not historic. It's not developed as historic right now, not because that's not the nature of the property, but because the owner has chosen not to pursue that. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, Ed?
Well, I agree with Ms. Blackburn that this is going to have implications for other areas of the city, and as Mr. Box pointed out, Western Avenue has tremendous similarities in that you have commercial development next to HP neighborhoods, and then you have areas next to that commercial development where you have R1 residential housing along Western Avenue, and then the pressure is building to develop that area. And as many are aware, we studied this issue with the OU Institute for Quality Communities. They did a year-long study where they looked at, among other things, the commercial residential edge along Western, and they made recommendations to try and avoid what we're seeing today, because I don't think this is going to stop. In my, on Western, we now have, very similar to this, and this, what we vote on today, will have direct implications for what we're seeing in Western, where a gentleman has commercial property, he's bought 3 R1 homes around it, and then he wants to tear down those homes and expand his commercial property. You can see on this that it's not just at the edge with Broadway, it goes back into the neighborhood, 2 more R1 lots. The problem we've seen on Western also is that we approve these SPUDs, and then perhaps the plans that we approve change. You know, we had Chesapeake, for example, bought on 50th and Western, and we did the large SPUD, and then the plans changed, and now we're stuck with a SPUD, and we don't know what's coming in next to this neighborhood. And that gives me pause. I think that C3 zoning gives me some pause next to an HP network. I mean, by definition, C3 zoning says it should be separated as much as possible, both visually and physically, from any nearby residential area. The recommendation of the OU study was that we should stop taking these on a case-by-case basis. If we're going to have commercial development next to these HP neighborhoods, we should, as a body, with our planning department, with the neighborhoods, with developers, use form-based code to define what development will be like along these corridors, and so that development uses the same rules for each development. It can go back this far. It has rules on building height, on setbacks, on parking strategies, which each and every one of these has disputes about parking strategies and how that impacts the neighborhoods. What are transition requirements? What are streetscape and landscape standards? If we came through and just said, this is what the form-based code is going to be like on Broadway, or this is what development is going to be like on Western, we wouldn't have these fights and this conflict with each and every development. And I think the pressure will continue to build, but we should have set standards and negotiate this all ahead of time and then have development come in. I don't think this is the way to go about it. I think, and I just encourage everyone, the last couple of pages of that OU study summarizes it very well and makes recommendations to this body to avoid what we're doing today, and for that reason I can't vote to proceed in this manner, as I think the Planning Commission and HP saw it the same way. Thanks.
May I address one issue on the...
Well, if we just come up with a code, then like these decisions really are almost moot, correct? I mean, we don't even, it's almost like we get rid of zoning cases. Well, in all the testimony that I've heard, Ms. Monier's resonates the most with me. Going case by case seems to be a better idea to me, but you know, I'm new. I don't see this as something would be a real hindrance to the neighborhood. I see it as something that could actually be solidifying to the neighborhood of where there's because when I see empty lots and dilapidated buildings, I mean, I don't want it to just sit there. I want something positive to go there, and I see this as something positive. So, I mean, I might be taking it too simplistic of an approach to it, but that's my perspective on it.
Well, I really appreciate what the historic preservation people have done. I think they've made some major accomplishments in Oklahoma City. However, this particular piece of property is located across the street, not only from a park, but a park that contains one of the largest fire stations, in Oklahoma City. It's diagonally across the street from one of the city's, maybe not the state's, largest retail liquor store. And it's located just south of an area that is less than desirable. This kind of an application, to me, provides a valuable buffer between commercial development and the residential development to the east of there, to the west there. And I think we need to be conscious of that. As my council colleague, Mr. White, so eloquently pointed out, we can't change our minds based on circumstance. And this circumstance here seems to be that we are encouraging somebody to build something that is compatible with the attractiveness of the HP district adjacent to it. And from that standpoint, the buffer between those commercial developments, the commercial activity along Broadway is well placed, well planned, and desirable. And if I will vote on it, I'll vote with James, I would approve this particular application.
All right, thanks, Pat. Yes.
I'm Katie Friddle. I'm staff from the Planning Department to the Historic Preservation Commission. I just wanted to clarify that for historic district designations, we do have two types of zoning, and something that we discussed with the applicant was changing from the HP zoning, which is a base zoning that includes residential single-family development, to an HL overlay, which would allow a multitude of uses however they wanted to define those, but retain the historic design conditions and controls, so they could develop something other than a single-family residence on that site, whether it turned out to be multifamily or some other commercial use, but would still go through the design review process with the Historic Preservation Commission to ensure that the new construction was compatible with the surrounding district. The commission has guidelines for new construction. They have guidelines for commercial properties, for parking, that type of thing. So that was another option, to say that this property is currently in the district, it's within the block and the defined boundaries. Yes, it's a difficult lot to develop, and it may have to be something other than single family, but the commission felt it should still remain within those controls for the design of what goes forward to be compatible with the surrounding area. We do have commercial properties abutting virtually all of our districts, and I think the commission was very concerned that this would lead to kind of a domino effect of those borders being chipped away at as commercial properties grow and develop, and there's encroachment of that into the residential areas. Thanks.
Thank you. David, did you want to speak, David?
Well, I have a question, Your Honor. David, could you explain this map a little bit better to me? And you may have to come up here. This is Broadway for just 2 blocks, and then it jumps back this way. How does that map work?
Around the fire station. The northbound is on the east side of the fire station, and so on the west side of the fire station, it's one way.
Okay. And exactly where on this map is the proposed area? Oh, I was looking over here, so it's just right there. And this is a picture of the area that you're proposing this development?
Yes, sir.
All right. David, I'll give you the final word before we take a motion.
Could you address that HL issue?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When we sat down the first time, we were more than willing to retain the HL designation. In fact, our first draft of the SPUD retained that. We were told by staff that based on our design, when we tried to make the HL work, they could not recommend approval. We couldn't provide buffering to the neighbors and meet our parking requirements with the HL designation. So it was at that point that my client had to make the decision to remove it. There was no way to develop it with the HL designation and provide the buffering to the neighbors. On the issue of C3, I do want to make sure the council understands that our application is a SPUD, and we take out virtually every single commercial use except for the uses needed for the medical spa. So we significantly restrain the uses that would be permitted on this site. So,
okay. Did you have a question for David? Go ahead, Larry.
I have a question for somebody, if they could answer. And it goes to this HL. Is HL a viable option in this case? And I think
Staff certainly felt that it was. We provided a number of comments and a number of changes, and the feedback that we interpreted from the applicant was, we want the design that we have, and we're going to go forward with that and see what we get. They weren't interested in trying to revise the designs, trying to look at the site plan differently. This is a unique site, and it would be a unique use. I think the commission would certainly recognize a number of unique circumstances to try and accommodate a development there while still doing that within the parameters of what's appropriate and what's going to be compatible with the neighboring properties. So, that's something that can be argued, but I think we did not work very hard on trying to find something that would be allowed under the HL overlay, and as far as we didn't get very far working with the applicant on that because they wanted to go forward with their design as proposed. I think that it is something that we could come to a resolution for all parties if we went forward with that strategy.
so. Your answer, what I'm getting back, is that yes, from your perspective, HL is a viable option.
I believe so.
Okay, can I ask the HP people just a minute? Is in your, Mr. President, in your perspective, paradigm.
We have HL zoning south of 17th Street along Broadway. In the neighborhood, HL, it's the alley between 16th and 17th. South of that, including the Aberdeen Apartments and many of those areas there, because it's multifamily, we have HL zoning in that particular area. So we have both HP and HL in our neighborhood. That would be a different option. Of course, to change this to HL would require to go back to HP Commission and Planning Commission and such. At this point, I think the most important thing is to recognize that this was done intentionally. We put this into HP because it faced the park. The park is historic property. It was given to the city with covenants in it restricting it to park usage 100 years ago, over 100 years ago. And by the Winans family. And Mr. Sherry here is actually one of the descendants of the Winans family who gave the park to the city and still lives in the neighborhood. And so that was the original intent, was to maintain that park connection to the neighborhood by the frontage property going R1 and staying in the HP. Now, it's always an option to make a change in zoning to maybe go to HL or something like that. Recognize there is still one historic home on this piece of property that is single family, and that would have to be addressed as well in any types of changes that we would plan here. The viewpoint from the historic neighborhoods, all 9 of the historic neighborhoods, is this will be the first time property is taken out of HP. All right, and that's what's so precedent-setting about this. Not necessarily this Broadway. It's the HP neighborhoods view this as an attack on the HP ordinance. And that is the real reason why we are so concerned about what's happening here. Because once you start nibbling away at the edges of the HP districts, where does it stop? Does it stop on Western? Does it stop on Broadway? Does it stop on 23rd Street? Any of these areas, you can have this continuous nibbling away, and you end up with what looks like bad dental work, with a missing house, a missing house, a missing house, and teeth in between. All right, and that's our big fear. And I don't think it's unreasonable to preserve an ordinance that the property owner was fully aware when we went through this process.
I think what we're trying to get at, are you going to oppose any commercial development along Broadway in that area based on the HP status that you currently have?
The current, yes.
Okay. I think that's what we're trying to determine.
Yes.
Here.
Now, again, HL's a different matter, okay?
So let me just very simple.
HL's multifamily, too.
I understand. I heard the lady say that, use the term, the multifamily might go on this property.
Residential is what we were looking for, because it connects to the park. You start putting businesses, you separate the park from the neighborhood. Residential is our main concern. And HL could be multifamily. So we have some flexibility here, but we don't want the park cut off from the neighborhood. Otherwise, it just becomes a median.
Councilman, if I could address that point. When we went to our neighborhood meeting, that was one of the things we talked about. We offered the HL, and we were told we don't want the commercial use. So we offered that. And when we went to look at the site plan pursuant to HL, we can't make it work with our parking. So then we're in a situation where maybe now we are creating a situation where we're not a good neighbor, because maybe people are having to park in the neighborhood and walk. So we offered that to the neighbors, and the neighbors at the meeting said, absolutely not. We don't want any commercial use.
So with HL, you might win staff, you may or may not win the planning commission, but you're probably not going to win the majority of the neighbors.
Right.
Just speaking generally on behalf of people who I don't have the right to speak on behalf of.
Absolutely. And I didn't want my client to be in a position where maybe they're having to fight this forever.
I understand.
Just the house that's remaining, that would be torn down?
Yes.
For surface parking lot?
For part of the landscaping, and there will be parking, yes. But the house is boarded up and vacant, and it will not be used.
Do you see that as potentially problematic or precedent-setting, especially on Western, where we're tearing down R1 houses for surface parking lot? To meet parking requirements for commercial development on the commercial residential edge?
You know, I don't believe so. And one of the things that I've said in this case, if this is setting a precedent, well, this is the precedent that I would want. I mean, if somebody is committed to a SPUD that takes out almost every use, commits to this type of landscaping, commits to this type of facade and architecture, well, that doesn't seem like a bad precedent to be setting.
But how many houses should we be able to tear down for surface parking lot? How deep into the neighborhood should we be able to go?
Well, I think the precedent has been set along Broadway. You can see how far back the commercial goes. But here, we actually have to require that we have parking with landscaping rather than all the other commercial uses up and down Broadway.
So if we approve this today, do you think we should be able to come to Western and say we did it on Broadway, so we should be able to go 2 houses back and tear down R1 houses too deep off of Western?
I think every case stands on its own merits. And here, like I said, the houses are gone. The one that remains is a very small kind of outbuilding, and it's boarded up and in very bad shape.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question?
Hold on just a second, Marvin. David, anything else?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Let's continue the council, Marvin. Yeah, David.
I'm sorry, but with respect, when you have a historic preservation area and you've got problems such as were raised here, what does the association have under its control to prevent the gathering of homeless people and the activity that's been going on there. What can be done to prevent that type of activity? Well, the lady behind you.
Yeah, Shannon?
Code enforcement, call the police, neighborhood security. I believe that all of the HP neighborhoods have private neighborhood security, and those people are very alert, and most of us use security that is a licensed police. And so if they see something illegal, they do call 911. They've advised us to call 911. So those are the things that it goes back to. And, you know, we've all dealt with these things, and it is unsightly along that. But we're so hopeful with what's happening everywhere else, it won't be unsightly on those residential lots on Broadway very long, I don't believe, the way things are happening. And, you know, we may get another dip in the economy and something could happen, but most of the people who live in the HP districts have weathered this stuff for 30 years, and we're the most optimistic we've ever been. And so I'm just asking, don't reverse this by loosening up on things. I think Ed certainly hears this from his neighborhoods. You have, what, 4 or 5 of them? Yeah, anyway. And so I think everybody in the neighborhood, we're also excited about what's happening, and we'd like you all to really back us to keep our neighborhoods and make them even better.
Well, but the question is, how do you allow a house to deteriorate to this level by being a part of a historic preservation area?
Well, I think it's probably been called in. I think Debbie and Randy could speak to that better. I think it's probably been in the hands of code enforcement for a better part of 10 years, probably. So I've not been calling it in or talking to the code enforcement people, but I'm sure it's been reported.
Yeah.
I lived on that plot, and I can tell you that I wasn't going to bring this up, but it was a nightmare because those houses were allowed to go down over 25 years. This is what we have dealt with on that block. And because any house that's abandoned attracts a bad element, it was attracting people who were doing drugs, and then they would bring these people and set them on the front porch. And they were out of their minds. And the person who owned the property had a property manager who would come out and say, I've begged this guy to do something or sell these properties, and he won't do it. He was very sympathetic. He knew what we were dealing with. People, I wasn't going to bring this up, but people having sex in the backyard and all kinds of wild parties. It attracted a horrible element. We lived with that and called on that for a long time. Finally, he was rewarded by having done what he wanted done, and that was a commercial real estate sign went up, and it was zoned residential. This is not a neutral decision. This, as you can tell, has a lot of meaning to me. I've got property still there, and I had finally convinced my husband that we could put money into these properties, we could sell them to decent people for homes. I feel like I have reneged on one of these, if this passes, to one of those property owners who bought this coming from another HP, thinking that he would have protection here. This is not a neutral decision. This is going to have implications on Western. This is going to have implications everywhere. Yes, these old neighborhoods are surrounded by commercial, but there is, I mean, we told the lady that is talking about buying this property, there's empty spaces all up and down 23rd. Why do you have to come to it and park a building that doesn't look historic? The plans are terrible. It looks like it's fine for Valverde out by Mercy Hospital. It looks like a medical building. It does not look like something that belongs in an HP.
Debbie, thank you. We're going to bring up Marvin, then we're going to move on. I don't sense that there's any undecided council members at this point. I think we're probably ready to vote. Marvin, I'll give you the final word, and I'll look for a motion.
Yes, sir. I'm not speaking for Heritage Hills East or any of the historic neighborhoods, but it seems like the HL concept has a lot of merit to explore. It gives us input into the design, and if parking spaces are the issue, certainly there's some variance allowed on parking, and I would ask that you all think about letting the HP Commission still be involved in this process and have control over the design aspects and other points in this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And of course, HL is a discussion for another day. In front of us is item 8B, and I'll look for a motion.
Move approval.
Okay, this is a motion to approve the zoning.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The motion is to approve. Cast your votes. The motion fails, 3-4. Is there another motion? A motion to deny? Do we need to do that?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Okay. The motion is to deny the zoning request. That motion passes 4-3. Thank you all.
Your Honor, if I may, I was under, it takes 5, I'm not sure how to handle this. It takes 5.
Mayor, it takes 5 votes to approve it, so in effect, there's no action taken on the item, and it goes away.
Right.
It's brought up again.
Okay. All right, so the motion was not, the motion to deny did not have enough votes.
Yes, it only has 4.
Okay. And so no action is taken today on this item. Is there...
There's not enough votes to approve it.
So the next step is still across the street at the county if they chose it. There's no more steps at the city process.
I think that a vote of 4-3 to deny is a denial because you have to have 5 votes to approve it. But
So you think the denial stands?
I think it's denied. But now if you want to hold this to the end of the docket, I can go ask Dan and see if he has a different legal opinion. But that you have to have 5 votes to pass it. It didn't pass today. So if that doesn't kill the item, then someone could move to continue it. But if you got a 4-3 vote not to continue it, it wouldn't be deferred. So
I think it's just no action, and I defer to you, but my understanding of the statute is you have to have 5 votes for action.
No, you don't have to have 5 votes to approve rezoning or approve an ordinance.
Okay. All right, well, I guess they could all be discussed down the line. Why don't you check with Dan before perhaps we can get a second opinion? But it seems to me like the current stance is that the zoning request has been denied. Thank you all. We're on to item 8C. This begins a series of items that come to us from the Traffic Commission. The first is in Ward 1. James, you okay with this?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. There's no protesting. Anybody signed up? No. So I'll move for approval.
All right, comments or questions here on item 8C1? All right, cast your votes. That item is approved unanimously. Item 8C2 is for some parking spaces in Ward 6. And Meg's not here, but I'm assuming she's okay with this. Is there a motion to approve? Move the item. Cast your votes on 8C2, and it passed unanimously. Item 8C3 is also in Ward 6, and this would have some metered parking on the north side of 10th Street. Okay. Is there a second? Cast your votes, and it passed unanimously. Item 8D is a public hearing regarding dilapidated structures. Is there anyone here hoping to speak under any item listed under 8D? All right. Do we have a second? We're voting on item 8D, and it passes unanimously. Item 8E is a public hearing regarding unsecured structures. Is there anyone here hoping to speak under any item listed under 8E? I see you standing up. Come on forward, please. And I will need your name and address for the record.
All right. I'm Dr. Robert Phillips. My address is 11307 Burning Oaks Road, Oklahoma City.
Okay. And which property were you hoping to speak on?
I'm speaking of on EF 2701.
All right. 2701 Northeast 21st Street, and that's in Ward 7, John.
Yes.
What can you tell us about this property?
I'll tell you about it, and then I have a request.
Okay.
The property has been secured many times. And at 10:20 last evening, my nephew and I completed it again. This time we didn't put up plywood. We put up 2x8s to make the doors secure. So you cannot get into it. Other places it would be called breaking and entering if someone did that.
Okay.
But for some reason, at that particular property, it's not considered so. So this is what I suggest, and I hope you all will think about it. This is a property I've been before you before, where I plan to do a distribution center to feed the hungry kids of Oklahoma City. That's why I bought the property when I retired from the military. Nobody was using it. I bought a bulldozer. I cleared it myself. After about $600 and some thousand later, they put a little road through there, and then all heck broke loose. Not long ago, people came all the way from Tecumseh to dump. In fact, Tim Webb, one of the inspectors, was out there with me. We had this guy tied up, and we were getting ready to put him in jail, hopefully. And he started saying, well, the city supervisor said we could dump here. So then the police called, and they said, no way would that happen. Someone would tell you that. Then he said, oh, they made a mistake. It was supposed to be on some school ground somewhere. And they thought that was a school ground. Shouldn't be able to dump anywhere illegally like that. But someone called me, and I left my patients, and I went down to see about it. And sure enough, he had been told he could do so. And so I was told it was a criminal act for me to own that property. I said, well, I think what's criminal is people on the east side don't have a farmer's market to go to, and everyone else has.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to put there, Mayor. And so my suggestion is let us close it off again.
It sounds like a great use, and you say the building is now secure as of last night. Our staff, I assume, has not had a chance
Yes,
to say
and
it.
my nephew
You know,
just...
what I'm going to suggest is that we leave this on, but you continue to work with our staff, and as long as the building is secure, as you say, you shouldn't have any more problem with us. John, are you okay with that? Is just leaving it on there?
However,
yeah,
I'm trying to develop this thing. I'm trying to get it so I don't have to be there every night and every day.
Yeah.
Before you put that road in, that was a dead-end street. Why not do that again? Every time I lost over $600,000 in that project so far. Every time I put something there, they steal it. All right? They don't want the wood. They want all the metal. So they strip all of my air conditioning out to the tune of $90-some thousand. All right? But I'm not going to give up for it.
I tell you, Doctor, the police chief happens to be in the room. Perhaps on your way out you can talk to him about, perhaps he has some ideas of how you can help secure the property.
Police are there every time. I thank God for the police, and I thank God for the angels who come by sometime and help, because they know. But if you make it a dead-end street the way it used to be, only 3 different vehicles go that way every day. So I don't see any need why it should be open like that. I cannot be there 24 hours a day to process that place.
Well, that's something John can consider. Perhaps he becomes more...
Yes, and if you can work with staff, and I would like to meet with you and your nephew. I have spoken with your nephew on several occasions, so staff will work with you, and I'll work with you as well.
And I thank you, Councilman Shadid. I thank you for all your help you've given.
Appreciate it. Is there a motion, John, to leave this on? I guess this one and all the others. Second? Yes. All right. We're voting on item 8E, and it passes as a group. Thank you. Item 8F is a request for a revocable right-of-way use permit by the American Heart Association to hold an event on April 19th. This would be the Central Oklahoma Heart Walk. Is there anyone here representing this organization? If you would come forward and tell us about your event, that'd be great.
Yeah. I'm Shelley Jordan. I'm representing the American Heart Association. I'm the director for the Heart Walk, which will be held this Saturday, April 19th. We are expecting 10,000 to 12,000 participants in the downtown area. The festivities begin at 8 a.m. at Chickasaw Bricktown Ballpark, and the walk will begin at 10 a.m., and we expect everything to conclude and us to be shutting down around noon. Any questions?
I don't think it's in Ward 6 and 7. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes, and it passes unanimously.
Thank you. Love for all of you to attend if you can.
Thank you. Again, that event is April 19th. Chief City is here now to take us through item 8G, and this is a resolution that has to do with some police policy.
Just briefly, what's before you is some policy changes. Some of it's just cleanup language, but it has to do with secondary employment. I think the three major components with the changes is one is with the workman's compensation and how officers are covered when they're working extra jobs as a law enforcement officer. It basically spells out what we've been doing in practice, and the fact that if an officer works off-duty as a police officer in uniform or even out of uniform, if they're working for a private entity, the private entity has to have insurance to cover anything that happens to the officer if he's not enforcing the law. Where we pick up coverage on workman's comp is if the officer is injured in an act of enforcing a local, state, or some type of federal law while he's working for this independent contractor. So it just spells out what the responsibilities of the officer is, how they'll be covered if something happens, and basically that doesn't change any practice that we've had in the past, but it does clarify it in our policies, and we haven't had in our policies before. The second thing, probably significant, is extra duty outside the corporate limits of Oklahoma City. And again, in practice, and state law requires that if an officer works outside their jurisdiction, that has to be at the permission of the local chief within that jurisdiction. I would have to give my permission for my officer to go out, have to get permission from the chief of police in the municipality where the officer may be working. That's spelled out in this also, that has to be done, because we've actually found some officers that were working for entities outside, and so we wanted to clarify the policy. Another major thing had to do with clarifying how many hours an officer can work during a week. Extra jobs, overtime, a total number of hours, so we're not overworking those officers, and they're not too tired to work their regular duty jobs. So we've always had some type of requirement, and this spells out exactly what that is.
All right. We have questions for Bill or a motion to approve? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Thanks, Chief. Nothing on item H today. No need to enter executive session. How about a motion to strike? Cast your votes. That item is struck. Item I is claims recommended for denial. Is anyone signed up? Yes. Anyone here to speak under any item listed under 8I? Yes. Okay, come on forward. Hi, good morning. We'll need your name and address for the record.
My name is Don Nichols. My address is 5911 Fox Run Way.
Okay. And you're here to speak on item D, I assume.
I am here to appeal to the council. I'm a simple man of simple means. On the 12th of January this year, there was an incident where there was sewage that backed up into our house, over 500 gallons worth of brown water. My yard at this point still has feces and toilet paper across the entire backyard. I've been told that it was recommended for denial because nobody in the past 5 years has had that problem. The problem being the backup of the sewage. I can't speak on behalf of those who are around me or whether they had that problem or not, but the northwest part of Oklahoma City for some time has had a number of problems with sewage backup. When I say I'm a simple man of simple means, I say that because I work 2 jobs. My wife works a job. We work at Epworth Villa, a retirement community, $10, $12 an hour. It's not something big. I'm a retired soldier. I spent the greater part of my life in the service of my country and the state. We worked at Thunderbird Youth Academy with at-risk youth for about 10 years. I don't know if you're aware of what that is, but it is. And it wiped out all of our savings. It wiped out everything we had. And at 60 years of age, I had to borrow money from my mother. There's a difference between what's right and what's wrong, and the denial of this is wrong. So I am asking, I also have a letter that I got from the city that says upon request the claimant did not provide an amount of damages or supporting documentation. It happened on the 12th of January. On the 14th of January, I did my filing. The documentation that I got from the city workers stated that the damage was, they have different blocks. One of them is for limited, substantial, major, and yard only. Mine was marked major. 500 gallons of sewage water is a lot of water. One of the second jobs that I do is I work for a commercial carpet cleaning business that does carpet tile and upholstery, and we go in and do restoration work and that type of thing. When this initially happened on the 12th of January, my wife called and said, hey, we've got a problem. We've got water running everywhere. We've got a bathtub that's filling up and pouring over into our bathroom. And I told her to run out there, grab the key, and turn off the water main, and we'll be there as quickly as we can. We finished our job up. We happened to be on duty at the time with that commercial carpet cleaning business. And so I had the facilities or the equipment and the manpower to go over to the house at that time. And when we came in, as soon as we walked in, the water was this deep throughout the entire bottom floor. It's a two-story house, no basement. The water was going down, and back in the 80s, it was a cool thing to put your air vents in the floor rather than up above. As a result, this brown water also went down inside the air vents. So we came in, and I had the equipment, so we started sucking the water out and getting as much out as we can. It's a 100-gallon discharge tank, and we dumped it 5.5 times, thus the 550 gallons of water. As a result, anytime brown water comes in contact with anything, that area has to be cleaned, that area has to be sanitized, that area has to be cleaned out. Fortunately, I had the means to suck the water out, but at that time, it was totally unexpected, and as a result of that unexpected problem, we had to call Service Pro and have them come in and pull all of the carpeting out, pull all of the furniture out. It got down into the heat exchange and fried the heat exchanger in our heater. As a result, some $12,000 later, we still haven't got to the point that we can even get the vents clean. Had we had the means, we would have done it, and this would not be an issue, but now it is an issue. And I feel that there's an unjust something going on here that says that we're going to deny it because nobody else had that problem in that segment. Less than 30 days later, the city was out there, and when the city came out, they brought 4 big trucks, 4 big backhoes, and they pulled out large root balls. I'm not the smartest joker on earth, but I know that they give you Rid-X to put in your septic tank that you do as maintenance to keep a problem from happening, and you don't pull out large root balls with 4 backhoes in order to accomplish something that would have been small. And so I'm asking for your understanding in this situation.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols.
Thank you.
Tina, you want to help out the council here and give us some background on this?
Mr. Nichols is correct. The reason this was recommended for denial is because there have been no prior complaints or work orders for the 5 years prior to this incident. Without prior notice, the city can't be held liable for the failure of the sewer line to carry whatever's going through. The fact that we went in afterwards and did all this remedial work upon our first notice indicates that if we had had a notice before, we would have been out there doing something. roots in the line do occur occasionally. When we know about them, we come out and get rid of them, as we did in this instance.
Yeah, I'm sensing this is one of those frustrating times when the council doesn't have discretion because of state law, am I right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What is the state law regarding this issue?
State law says that the city, in order to be held liable, has to have notice of a problem. A duty to fix it would be triggered by notice of a problem. In this case, we had no notice, so no duty to fix it, and no liability for not having done it in advance of this incident.
Okay. So, Mr. Nichols, our problem is that state law does not give the council discretion to pay the claim, and so our hands are tied.
Yes, sir, I understand laws. I've abided by them my entire life. But there is also a difference between what's right and what's wrong. If one person other than myself had complained about it to begin with, and I was the second person, then we wouldn't be going through this. But because I was the first one, and don't get me wrong, I want you to understand what happened. When I arrived back at the house to go in and start sucking out this brown water, we noticed that the neighbor to the left of us had water now running out from underneath their garage. Their water heater was located in their garage. Mine's located inside the house, and it was coming up through there and through the bathtubs. When I saw the water coming out from there, I ran to the backyard, and there's a release there. And once that release was done, matter of fact, it was on Channel 4 News about the problems in the northwest Oklahoma City area, and they showed this water pouring out like a geyser, and that was my yard. They were given permission to use that for their footage, but that was my yard. There's a difference between right and wrong, and this is truly wrong. I understand the law. I understand that's why I'm here. That's why I'm before the city council. If this happened in your yard, if this happened in your house, you'd be asking the same questions. Why? Because I'm the first person in the past 5 years. This root ball that they pulled out was not this big. The root ball that they pulled out was huge. It takes time. And it's cost me money, and I'm told now all my savings are for naught. All my is for naught because I was the first one to report it. There's something wrong with that law.
Yeah. Well, I think most of us tend to agree with you. But thank you for coming down.
I just wanted to clear the record real quick. Travis Smith, attorney for Don Nichols, 1901 North Classen. I just take issue with one matter on this memo. It says, upon request, claimant did not provide an amount of damages or supporting documentation. We never received a written or an oral request for documents, and we'd be happy to comply with those.
That request would have been in the initial letter they received that said that we needed documentation of any damages that they had. There's an initial, well, the claim packet comes with a cover letter that says that you need to provide the documentation.
But that's really not the issue here.
That's not the issue.
Yeah, that's not the issue here.
Really?
If we were paying a claim, I guess that would be the issue.
Sure.
But if we're not allowed to pay the claim, then it's really not an issue.
The problem with us is we haven't had an opportunity to conduct discovery. We haven't commenced the litigation yet. And so we haven't had an ability to send our experts out there to inspect whether the city had notice or should have had notice. And so we're sort of handicapped to be able to present our case in this 90-day limited period that we make these claims. I don't think that we're going to be able, I don't think I'm going to have this problem by the time we get to jury trial, establishing that the city had notice and should have been aware of this.
What is the limitation on what he's referring to, Tina?
The Government Tort Claims Act requires that they give us notice within a year of the event to start the process.
Within a year of the event is when you can...
Well, no, that's when they have to file their claim. Once a claim is filed, if it's not approved within 90 days, then the next period that's triggered is a 180-day window of time during which, if they want to go forward and file a lawsuit, they have to do that within 180 days of the denial of the claim, which would be 180 days from today.
Okay. So he still has plenty of time.
Yes.
To start legal action if he chooses.
In the 90-day period he's speaking of, is under the Tort Claims Act, after the claim is filed, it is deemed, by law, it's deemed denied within 90 days. So they certainly can file a lawsuit and then conduct discovery in the lawsuit.
Okay. Any other council have any other comments they want to make? All right, how about a motion then on item 8I? Is there a second? Okay. And we're voting to deny the claims on 8I, and it passed unanimously. Claims recommended for approval. Is there anyone here hoping to speak on any of those items? All right, how about a motion here? Cast your votes. It passed unanimously. Next up is items from council, but we have a presentation scheduled for city manager reports from Gary Cox, and I know Gary has an 11 o'clock appointment. I'm going to ask the council's permission to bring Gary up now and allow him to give us a presentation on the wellness scores from the health department that are, I guess, an annual report. Gary, good morning.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for allowing us to come for a few minutes this morning to share with you some good news. And a couple of comments before we get started, and that is the good news that we have as a result of a lot of people's work, including the mayor and the city council, the community partners, everyone that's interested in health and wellness. And so I wanted to preface our comments with that bit of information. Well, every 3 years, 3 years ago, we did a wellness score. And so we're comparing the one that we just completed just a few weeks ago with the one that we had 3 years ago. And this is a score that's a combined score for Oklahoma City and Oklahoma County. And so we hope that maybe by sharing some of this information with you, it may be of assistance for you in you making your decisions about policy matters here in Oklahoma City. The wellness score is an aggregate, and it includes some of these indicators that you see above, all the way from crime to the sidewalks and parks and biking trails to jobs, along with the traditional indicators that you would think that you would have regarding chronic disease and infectious disease and the others that you see listed out there. This one's a little bit hard, but I think I'm having a little hard time seeing that myself from this point. Let's just go on to the next. Oh, okay. Okay, I can see it now. Yeah, thank you.
One would dim the lights in the room.
Yeah,
would that be helpful?
That would help.
Is there a way we can do that?
That's a little bit of a light screen. Terrific. Yeah. So this is the good news. Our overall mortality or death rate in Oklahoma City and Oklahoma County decreased by 1.2% over the last 3 years. That's a significant decrease in a 3-year period of time. If you look at some of the deaths from preventable chronic diseases, you see that stroke deaths were reduced by almost 4%, heart disease deaths by almost 3%. You see there breast cancer, lung cancer, and prostate cancer by almost 7%. So that's great news. This is a map of Oklahoma City and Oklahoma County, and you will see in the darker colors there that is the most challenged health outcomes in our city and county, and the lighter colors, those are the more favorable, better health outcomes. And you'll see generally in the interurban core, the health outcomes tend to be more challenged. In the more suburban areas, they tend to be a bit better. Here's a bit of good news. It's a good news, bad news story. 3 years ago, when we did this same analysis, zip code 73111 in northeast Oklahoma City was the most challenged. The good news is, and I know we've put a lot of resources in that zip code, a lot of other folks have as well. The good news is that's no longer the worst health outcome zip code. It has improved. Now the bad news is that the worst health outcome zip code now has shifted to southwest Oklahoma City, zip code 73108, 73109, and that cluster of zip codes in southwest Oklahoma City. So it's kind of a good news, bad news, but we are making some progress. Okay. This is just a little bit more detail about some of the factors that went into this score. It is an aggregate score of all of these factors, all the way from income and poverty. We know that poverty is a strong predictor of poor health, but we also know that access to things that keep us healthy is an important factor as well. But you see there all the chronic disease indicators, infectious disease, even the crime and healthcare access, even down to preventable hospital stays and physicians per capita. We won't dwell on this, but this is how our staff of epidemiologists arrived at this aggregate score. But basically what it does, it takes the average wellness score for a particular zip code and compares it to the average of the county, and then how much does that deviate from the average for the county. I'll just say that we're the only city and county in Oklahoma that does this score, although it could be replicated statewide. I think it would be useful information to have. Now, as far as resource allocation, basically what we've done at the Oklahoma City County Health Department is we've taken our board directive from our Board of Health seriously, and that directive was to become lean, to become more efficient in what we do. And so I know 3 years ago our staff count was over 300, about 310. It's down now to about 250, and yet we've been able to increase our client visits and our services along the way. And so we take very seriously the opportunity to improve what we do and to become more efficient in how we do business and more responsive to the public at the same time as far as customer service. What that's allowed us to do is to shift some of our resources around to areas of higher need. And so that's why we were able to put a lot more resources in zip code 73111, and it is allowing us to shift resources to southwest Oklahoma City in areas that we think will really make a significant difference in health outcome. But certainly place matters, and where we live does matter because of the access to things that do keep us healthy. And as far as poverty and educational attainment and all of those other indicators, we do put our funds in things that work, that are proven to work. And so we do have evidence-based programs that are put into place, and I'll give you an example of that just in a minute. Engagement of policymakers, and I know the mayor co-chairs the Wellness Now Coalition. I know many of you have been involved in engaging in the discussion around keeping our community healthy and well. And we do put a prevention and wellness priority. We know we have a terrific, I call healthcare system here in Oklahoma City, but we also know that we can really save some dollars in taxes, in rates, and as well as lives by putting more of an emphasis on wellness. If you just take the two unhealthiest zip codes in Oklahoma City, you see several things. Number one, of course, the incomes are going to be much below what the national average is. But if you look at the teen birth rate, you see that there's if you compare healthiest to unhealthiest, there's a difference of about 3 times. Diabetes deaths, about 4 times difference. Cardiovascular heart disease deaths, twice the difference. Lung cancer deaths would be, 2.5 times difference. So there is quite a disparity between our our best and our worst performing health zip codes.
Gary, can I ask you,
Yes.
can you give just a very rough outline of the borders of these 2 zip codes? I mean, what area of the city we're talking about?
Okay. So the healthiest zip code would be, I don't have the map up there, would be in far western Oklahoma City, 73099. It'd be in that area. And the poorest performing, the poorest performing zip codes would be 73111 in northeast Oklahoma City and 73108 in southwest Oklahoma City.
Is that by just south of I-40? Or?
Yes, sir. It would be just west of 40, east of 44 and south of 40. So it'd be between 40 and 240.
Okay. And the borders north-south or?
North-south, basically it'd be right there where the northeast campus is, would be the epicenter, I guess you would say, there and south of that point. So it'd be in the area of east of MLK, between, let's just say, 63rd and down to...
But for 73108 and 73109, it would be between...
They would be between I-35...
and 44.
Oh, it's
a little bit better.
West than that.
It's west of Pennsylvania, east of I-44, and it begins, I don't know how far north it goes, perhaps all the way to Reno, and then as far south down to 59th, I believe.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good question. Maybe next year we can add in some of the interstates and have a better idea of exactly what these locations are.
Ed, I think it's Ward 6.
Yes. Okay. Now, there's a huge economic cost as well as a cost in lives and health. There's a huge economic cost in the unhealthy zip codes. And again, if we just take the two most challenged, 73111 and 73108, and these are very conservative numbers, but you see high blood pressure, the cost there, $120,000. These are annual figures all the way up to diabetes, $462,000. Very conservative number that just covers part of these costs is over $5 million a year. If you look at Oklahoma County as a whole, the cost of diabetes alone is $44 million per year. So it has a significant economic impact on our community. We can imagine just the diabetes cost in our community, what we could do with that $44 million per year if that were put into improving our community and having more places to exercise, be healthy, and improve our quality of life. As far as opportunities, as far as best practices, and you see here, and this is generally true throughout all of these slides, if you compare Oklahoma County to the state, Oklahoma County is just about average out of the 77 counties, of course, and if you compare the state to the United States, we, of course, are going to be lower in health outcome in general. If you want to take it a step further and compare the United States to the world, we're about 30th in the world, although we spend more money on health care than any other country in the world. And so we do have challenges, but we also have opportunities, and we are making some gains. And so if you look at the hypertension, high blood pressure, death rates, you see we're about the same as the state, considerably higher than the state. Just about the same thing for diabetes deaths. And diabetes deaths is there's two areas where we have not made improvements, and diabetes deaths is one of them. The other one, as you'll see, is suicides. And unfortunately, those are going in the wrong direction. Now, what are some of the things that we could do with these chronic diseases that we've talked about? Well, here's some great news. 2 years ago, we implemented in 73111, most challenged health zip at that time, a My Heart program, which is cardiovascular disease prevention. And so we we went out and screened in the community, identified high-risk folks, and got them on a medical home, also with medications as far as if they had high blood pressure or they had cholesterol, high cholesterol, things of that nature. And And also, we gave them wellness classes that were free on how to control, if they had prediabetes or they had diabetes, how do you control that, smoking cessation and things of that nature. And I'm happy to say that we've made tremendous, I think that's one of the big reasons that we've had the improvements. And 400 people of very high risk have gone through that program. We want to expand that to southwest Oklahoma City in those zip codes that are challenged there. Other communities that have done this, it has the potential to reduce heart attack deaths by at least 20% in a short period of time of 3 years. And so we think there's a lot of opportunities there. Of course, with all the maps and the wonderful work that's going on there with the urban park and expanded trails and all, that's all going to help, and I think that's already beginning to help. We've used community health workers, and we've mixed them in with the traditional care providers of the primary care and mental health. We think that's a great opportunity, and we think those are very effective, and it's relatively inexpensive as compared to a physician or a nurse. Policy opportunities, of course, is what you deal with here. Anything that we can do, and we appreciate the smoke-free parks, all of those things add up and make a difference. Anything that we can do to further improve the tobacco, it's still the number one killer, number one preventable cause of death in Oklahoma. Anything we can do to get a reimbursement system for community health workers, to expand that, and particularly to work with the hospitals and all, because they're using community health workers too, it's going to be something that's going to pay dividends to us. Crime and mental health, I won't spend much time on this, but it's a challenge, as we know, in Oklahoma County and in the state. Same thing in suicide. We've had the unfortunate spike in the last 2 years in Oklahoma County of suicides. Unfortunately, many of that are teens, are school-age children, which is a real tragedy. And we also know that both in crime and suicides, that many times that's untreated mental illness or alcohol and drug abuse. And so we also know that it's either untreated or those are major issues. And much of it is preventable. So some of the things that can be done, we have a youth suicide prevention grant where our folks go out and train teachers throughout the city and throughout the county on how to recognize warning signals. That's a good program. Health at school, anything we can do to work with the kids is going to pay dividends later on. After school programming. And so again, as far as our opportunities go, anything that we can do to create a collaborative a model that we're using, which is joining together primary care, mental health, and the wellness and public health, that's a great model that's proven to be effective. Maternal and child health, you see the teen birth rates in Oklahoma County and in the state, and it's higher in Oklahoma County. In our Wellness Now coalition, there's a new group that was brought from the community to the coalition to help to address that issue. There are some foundations in Oklahoma City that are working on that issue as well. We know that if a teen mother gives birth, it's almost a certainty that both the teen mother and the child will live in poverty. Premature birth is the same situation. We have some real challenges there. Some of the things that can be done.
I got a question on that one.
Sure.
The ages on there said 15 to 19. I mean, there legitimately could be some 18 and 19-year-old married women who are having babies. So, I mean, is that taking into account that or not?
We categorize unmarried births as well on a separate statistic. It's not shared.
Okay, so some of those births could be to married women.
But we can overlay that data to
Good question. Thank you. A group that meets, and it's a group of community folks that get together and they review every fetal and every infant death in Oklahoma City and Oklahoma County, and they look for ways and education opportunities and how those deaths can be prevented. That's a very effective group. Of course, policymakers, you are critical, and you have provided great support on health and wellness, and we appreciate that very much. But anything we can do to help with our educational system will pay dividends in health, because there's a strong link between high school graduation rates and health. Anything that we can do to get jobs, which I know you work on every day here, pays dividends, because we know that there's a strong link between poverty and health. And of course, that job linkage is obvious. Health and all policies, we appreciate the work that you do, but to continue to think about, as you make decisions here, about what is the health impact of that decision. Is it going to move us towards a healthier city, or is it going to move us in the opposite direction? Any sort of incentives that we can have for businesses, and businesses are a critical link here. They are just an indispensable partner that we have to have in order to improve our health. But any incentives for businesses, hospitals, and other groups that would work with local health departments that are going to incentivize working together is going to be great. And we're already getting some national recognition about the things going on here in Oklahoma City, specifically around businesses reaching out not only about workplace wellness, but about how they can positively impact health in our community. Anything that we can do policy-wise, for example, increasing tobacco tax, and I know that taxes aren't popular. I don't like taxes either, but a tobacco tax is particularly effective, and it's shown that for every $1 increase in a tobacco tax, it will reduce the number of kids that begin smoking by about 9%. That's powerful, because that's 9% of kids that will never take up that habit, and 9% of the kids will probably live, maybe 10 years longer because they don't take up that habit. And to continue the emphasis that you have on prevention and wellness, and to continue that conversation in the community around that, that positive vibe in our community is very helpful. So what can be done, and it's listed out here, but a lot of it's around Wellness Now, which is a coalition of over 150 businesses and community organizations in our city, and it's growing every day. They have a meeting every 3 months, and I can tell you out at our campus and our auditorium, that room is full of folks, and so there are folks that are more and more interested in health and wellness. And of course, to continue our relationships with the business community and make them a critical partner in being part of the solution to this issue. And it's good news, but we've got a lot of work to do, and we appreciate all of your help. And we're here, we stand ready to help you in any way we can to work with others to improve health in Oklahoma City.
Gary, thank you. If we could turn the lights back up. Are there any comments or questions for Gary?
Gary, one of the things that sticks out to me is that the city's involvement in wellness and all this is really not a long-time commitment. It's only come about in recent years.
Yes, sir.
Because I was here at a time when we never discussed that tobacco use was important to the future of Oklahoma City. I mean, it just wasn't done 30 years ago. Now, we talk about it in some form or another almost every Tuesday. There's something comes up almost every Tuesday about it. Not being long-term participants in the wellness thing, I'm not so sure that the city has the depth of staff to be looking into different things we can do. I think we're going to be relying on people like you to bring ideas to us. Not so much in generalities, but in specifics. I mean, this is something you can do. Because I just don't think we have the policy base Maybe we'll build it in another 20 years, but I don't think at this point we have that policy base to be coming up with those kinds of things. So I'd be interested in specific suggestions about things like e-cigarettes, for example. I mean, I have a gut feeling that e-cigarettes are not a good thing, and they ought to be restricted. Now, we obviously operate in a legislature that thinks they know more about everything than anybody else does, and so they restrict our ability to control things like e-cigarettes, like everything. And so that's a problem we have to deal with. But I think we need to be on the cutting edge of trying to do that. But I think it'd be very helpful if you would supply for us specifics. I appreciate the generalities, so don't take that as a criticism. I appreciate the generalities, but I think specific things that we can do. If there are studies, for example, that show that e-cigarettes are continuing this problem of addiction to tobacco, for example, then I think those are things that we need to see, because I for one, am willing to take that challenge on, despite the lobby at the legislature that will try to stop us from doing it. I feel the same thing about a lot of different areas in public health. But I think we're going to need some direction from agencies like you to bring those issues to us.
Okay. Excellent comment. Thank you. And I think in the past, my opinion is we just have a thoughtful and forward-thinking council that's beginning to look at these issues and determine how important they are to our community. And we're more than happy to provide you that information. That's why we're here. And we're talking about, for example, and I know we've got a meeting scheduled with City Manager Couch and others about potential partnerships between the city and the Oklahoma City Health Department and Oklahoma City Public Schools. Because one of the things that we need to do, we see the huge need in South Oklahoma City. And what can we do in these partnerships down there to begin to make an immediate impact there? And then in Northwest Oklahoma City shortly after that. So I think we have some real opportunities, and I think the policy issues are powerful, but I think the partnerships that we can form in our community, public and private, are critical to getting the job done too. But we stand ready to help you.
Yeah, Larry?
I'd just like to pass on a quick praise to you all and your staff. Last Friday, you all hosted on your campus the senior event put on by Triad, yes, Oklahoma City Police, Midwest City, Oklahoma County Sheriff, the fire department was out there. We had several hundred seniors out there, and they were addressing safety and health issues. And thank you for making that available. I know it was a very productive event for the seniors that were there. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Yeah, the Northeast campus and the auditorium and the training facilities are heavily used. Our auditorium out there, holds 350, 400 people, and the training room about 150. And it's in use on a typical day, 3 or 4 events per day. It's been a tremendous resource. It's become a city and regional training center, even a state training center for a lot of health and wellness type and safety type of activities. And so we're happy to provide that resource to the community.
All right. Gary, thank you. I know you got to get somewhere at 11. We appreciate it.
Can I ask just a quick
sure.
question?
Go ahead.
Do you
Gary
know,
says okay.
of the suicides, how many are veterans? Do you have that data? Or?
Well, I don't have the number. It is a significant issue. It is a significant issue.
Gary, how do we did this Gallup survey also, and both that one and this, it's how do we get mental health and addiction into some of these wellness scores, and so that we can get a baseline and figure out where we are. We have some of the highest opiate prescription rates per capita, not just in the U.S., but in the world. How do we try and quantify that and figure out if we're making progress or regressing? Or
Well, they were included in a broad basis, Alicia, in this aggregate wellness score, and of course, some of the things we're doing to try to address that, and I mean it's an important issue, is that with the mental health work group of the Wellness Now Coalition, a group that's come together to try to figure out, prioritize some projects and interventions, and to try to pull the partners together to see if we can impact that issue. But Alicia, probably.
We'll be providing you, we run out of the wellness scorebooks, but we'll be providing the council a new batch when those arrive. But in that, there's actually a wellness score dedicated just to mental and substance abuse issues. We've included all data that's available at the zip code level. Of course, prescription drug abuse is not available at that level. So we're limited by what's available in terms of the lowest common denominator for the data. But we have made a purposeful effort to include substance abuse and mental health issues in the total wellness score and then as a categorical.
Great.
And you'll see that in the larger compilation of the data. And of course, the Gallup poll results were also incorporated into the overall community health needs assessment. So when you get that book, you'll also see the summary of that data and how that can be used to develop planning and strategy on quality health issues.
Great, thank you. Just to Pete's point about specific recommendations, there's an avalanche of data now about how that the built environment impacts public health, and I mean, it would really be our planning department that's charged with making specific recommendations. But does the Wellness Now Coalition work with our planning department? Is there dialogue back and forth as a specific?
Absolutely. There's our representative right there, Ken.
Excellent.
He's on the task, I'll tell you.
Great.
Planning's been a great resource, and we've had some great collaboratives between the planning department and the health department.
And is healthy food delivery, different strategies, is that on the horizon? Is that part of the strategy, or other than just grocery store? I mean, are we looking for?
We recently submitted a $500,000 grant to the National Prevention Partnership Award, which the city was a supporter, specifically to begin a sustainable local grocery market. The Wellness Now leadership team is supporting that by helping to solicit sponsorships. So we secured donations from the Beverage Association and the Coca-Cola Bottling Company to provide trucks that we can then renovate and use for local food delivery.
So that goes through the neighborhoods and delivers healthy food. They can shop through the trucks. Great. Thank you very much.
All right. Gary, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Item 10 is items from council. Our first is sponsored by council members Salyer, Shadid, and White. Meg, I know you were
I'll be happy
instrumental in
to
getting this going.
go ahead and get started, and then ask anybody would like to speak about it again. Some of our wonderful chicken friends are here. Thank you. We spend a lot of time on this, and we have introduced this once before, and it was referred back to the planning department, but just for those that haven't been sitting on the edge of their chair being worried about chickens, I'll try to recap that this ordinance being introduced today takes an existing section in our current code that would allow for a new use unit classification designated as animal raising chickens, and that would provide for a special exception use in all zoning districts. To go back at how we looked at this once before, currently one could have chickens in their backyard if you have an acre or more of land. There was a proposal put forth to remove that acreage requirement and just allow anybody to have chickens anywhere. I had some concern, I think some others might have, that at least 50% of my constituents were opposed to that. And so a different approach that we used was to create this new use unit classification with an exception, create an application where there would be a $25 fee. Within the restrictions, all of those that were brought forward originally are included. Just to recap them, roosters are prohibited. A shelter or a coop has to have a 10-foot setback and provide 4 square feet per chicken. Access to an unpaved outdoor area of at least 8 square feet is required. Shelters must be kept in the back or side yard. Shelters must be kept clean. Outdoor slaughter is prohibited. So all of the restrictions that we had in the previous ordinance already apply. And the difference here is that for every application, citizens within 300 feet of the applicant's property would be notified. And for my purposes, that is the change I wanted to see, that neighbors also have the opportunity to weigh in here. I think it's important to note that approvals for special exceptions expire by default if they're not used within a 12-month period. And if the use is discontinued, they also expire. So if a property sells, this isn't a permanent zoning change that goes with the property. If somebody wants to raise chickens, the next homeowner doesn't, this use would expire. And so I think we've been able to find an approach that meets the needs of those families, and there are many of them that want to raise chickens, but it also addresses the concerns of the neighbors that perhaps located in urban areas specifically because they didn't want to have to deal with that. So I think we've tried to balance to the best of all possible worlds, and we'll never make everybody happy, but I think this is an opportunity to address as many issues as possible.
All right.
Colleagues?
Pete?
Comments?
Ed? Any other comments?
It's a comment I'd like to make. I think this is an important step in the right direction. But, Meg, you might mention that the application is to the Board of Adjustment.
Correct. This application, just like all other zoning exceptions, would go before the Board of Adjustment. And if citizens, if neighbors want to protest, they would do so, they can do so in writing, so they're not required to go before the Board of Adjustment, but they could go before the board if they wanted to. And I have been asked before, how is the board going to weigh this? How many, is there a number? And they look at these kind of cases on a regular basis, and they have a procedure in place. And so these will be taken on a case-by-case basis. But it does provide for neighbor input should there be concern about your neighbor having chickens.
I think that's one of the most important things we've done is provide an opportunity for neighbors to have some say in it. Because that was my concern with the original ordinance. Somebody could do it all on by themselves, burden the neighbors with something that they would not want to be burdened. I think big step.
Okay. And items just being introduced today. We'll have a public hearing on April 29th.
I have a question.
For final adoption for May 13th.
The definition of side yard. What is the definition of side yard? I should remember that, but do you guys remember the? Sorry to spring it on you.
Typically in residential, it's 5 feet from the property line.
Okay.
So, that's pretty standard for a side yard.
And does it have to be on their side of the fence? Like there has to be a fence there for it to be classified as where the side yard starts?
No, it's determined at the property line of the lot.
Okay.
So.
Right.
All right. How about a motion to move this forward? Passes unanimously. Item 8B is another item that's being introduced today, and Councilman Shadid and Councilman Ryan have been working on this with staff.
Today we'll just introduce it, we'll have a public hearing on it, and then vote on it the third week. And I would urge all the council members to look at this very carefully. Any comments, give them to me or to Dr. Shadid or to Kenny Jordan, because this is a much refined attempt, but there's probably still some work to be done on it. So if it's not clear to you exactly what's meant by this ordinance, please let us know so we can get it straightened out.
Okay. Yeah.
I had just one question about it. I agree with what Pat completely, that it's this, but there are two definitions on it that I'd like for the municipal councilor just to tell us what the definition, exceptions, number 3 and number 4. If you just give me an example of what those are.
I'll let Cindy take the first stab at it.
Okay.
I can always chime in.
Exception number 3 simply involves purchases that are made where you give lawful consideration for the property or service that you receive. So that would be an exception from being a gift that needed to be disclosed. Number 4 is about, it makes it clear that these things that probably are not considered gifts anyway, it clarifies that they are not gifts. And these are things received from the city or trust or their agents to facilitate the performance of your public duties. So things like having coffee and donuts out here in the chamber when there's a special reception, getting a shovel when you go to break ground, things like that, tickets,
to events that you need to attend as part of your council and mayoral duties. So those are the kinds of things that are included in exception number 4.
Cindy, I've been, oh, sorry.
And I would add on that on the part about the contractor, a good example of that would be, for example, the South Oklahoma City Chamber sponsoring a South OKC-related event to promote the community and inviting the council member to attend and comping the attendance and/or any food or beverages or anything that you would consume while you were at that facility, because you were there because you're the council member and you're trying to promote economic development or the development of South Oklahoma City. So I would say in the first place that it wouldn't be a gift for that reason, but this makes it clear on the face of it that it's not.
So I've been curious about that ticket issue because I think many of us attend lots of events. So your example, Kenny, was the South Oklahoma City Chamber, which has a contract with the city. What if it is an entity, a nonprofit, and I'm just going to use an example. I don't think I did this year, but so the YWCA has an event every year, their Purple event. I have attended that in the past as a council representative, I view that as part of my job responsibility. That comp ticket, is that a gift?
I would say as part of your council responsibilities, if that's something that is part of what you need to do, no, it's not. And it probably also fits other exceptions. It probably wouldn't reach $300 in 6 months.
Nor do they have a contract.
Nor do they have a contract with us. But if they don't, okay. I appreciate the effort to try to do this. I think this is going to be virtually impossible to try to figure out. It's extremely complicated, and how we do it, I'm just not quite sure. But Kenny's going to teach us, I guess.
Yeah, any of these things like this are on a case-by-case basis. You have to make a factual determination on a case-by-case basis. It's really rather difficult to come up with language. That's why there are attorneys and thousands of lawsuits all over the place, because people write down words and then they're not exactly sure how they apply to specific facts.
Quick question. Quick question. Let's say the downtown Oklahoma City or the Oklahoma City Chamber has a high dollar event, and they offer a ticket to attend that event. And even though it is a high dollar event, where I may be sitting at a table where somebody may have given the chamber $25,000 for a sponsorship, is that considered a gift, or is that just part of the duty as a city councilman?
Even though the chamber has just like the South Chamber has a contract with the city, you attending that event is in connection with your public service. So no, that would be covered under exception number 4.
Kenny, have you thought about how we're going to value those things? I think as John just pointed out, organizations have events and they have sponsors that might sponsor a table of 8 for $10,000. That ticket's worth, $8,000. They might have also individual ticket sales, and the tickets are worth $50. How do we determine which one of those tickets we have?
That's a good question. It's a fact question. This basically, the language that receiving things of value in the aggregate that exceed the value of $300, essentially that came out of the State Ethics Commission rules for state officers and employees, and also the language in B1 and 2 about what it applies to, and that they don't have any method of valuation either. So, that's the kind of thing you get into with this type of trying to address this.
Kenny, would we be able to, as we go forward with this, if those situations arose, we could submit a specific request to your office, and you could give us an advance ruling? Yes. Okay.
Well, I just have a brief comment. I think this is heading down with some unintended consequences. I personally have total trust in every member in this council. I believe that every member in this council, since I've been on since 2001, have lived up to their oath of office, which very clearly tells you and I that we're not able to take any payment for the performance or non-performance of our duty. That's not particularly allowed. We have an ethics hotline here that should anybody suspect that there's anything going on, they can call the ethics hotline. It'll be totally investigated. And then those of us that sit on trusts every year have to sign off that we have no impropriety or any arrangement with anybody that does business with the trust. So I think we're heading down a slippery path that really I don't see the need for. And I'm not going to debate it. That's just my personal opinion. Thank you, Your Honor.
Motion to introduce this and move it forward. All right, cast your votes on 10B, and it passes unanimously. We'll move on to a public hearing on April 22nd. And item 10C is a presentation by Israel Anderson, who's with the Environmental Justice and Tribal Affairs from the EPA Region 6. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and council members. Thank you very much for the opportunity to appear here today. And I'd especially like to offer my thanks to Councilmember Pettis for inviting me. I've known and met Councilmember Pettis within the last year. And so we, in fact, we were able to get him to attend an environmental justice workshop that we conducted earlier this past year, September 13 in New Orleans, Louisiana. So today I'm also accompanied by one of my colleagues from my team at the office, Mark Allen. Mark, would you stand? Mark is a native Oklahoman, graduated from Anadarko High School and attended Northeast University at Tahlequah. And I might add, I feel like Oklahoma is my second home. I was born in Texas, but my mother was born in Cole County, Lehigh, and my grandfather founded the first public school for African-American children in that county long ago. So I've been coming here all my life, literally, and it's good to be back today. Next slide, please. Wow. I use this quote from our former administrator, Lisa Jackson, dated 2010, because I think it really brings home the significance of what I'm here to talk to you all about today, which is including environmental justice principles in all of the decisions that we, the federal government, because I am in fact from the United States Environmental Protection Agency, Region 6, located in Dallas, and I failed to give you the address for the record. It's 1445 Ross Avenue in Dallas. But we must include all of the considerations for environmental justice principles in our decision-making. I won't go into the history, but an executive order signed in 1994 by then President Clinton established that requirement of all federal governmental agencies. As you might expect, over time, things don't always keep the original focus that was intended when something at that level happens. And so when this current administration came into office and Administrator Jackson was appointed as the administrator of EPA, she came forward with this statement you have in front of you about the principles of environmental justice and including it in all of our decision making. Next slide, please. So what I'm going to do today is give you a quick overview, the definition, a little history, not much, our current administrator, Gina McCarthy's commitment to environmental justice. I'll tell you what environmental justice is, what a community that's been designated or termed an environmental justice community is. Next slide. What we do to assist environmental justice communities at the federal level. It will have some meaning for you here at even the city level. But we work with all of our partners, states, municipalities, in the effort to ensure that as you all, as governing bodies, take decisions on, that you consider the impact on all of your citizens. And then finally, I'll conclude with some contact information. Next slide. So what is environmental justice? The Environmental Protection Agency defines it as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income. A lot of people don't realize that that's what it really means. It's nothing new. It's the way we all hope to do our work every day. Next, please. And to do that with respect to the development, implementation, enforcement, of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. And in sitting here today, this morning, I've seen you all as a body take up a number of measures, and I've heard you repeatedly talk about your interest in making sure you do what's best for the public good. And that's what environmental justice asks all of us to do at every level of government, is to, as we make our decisions, as we consider policies, as we consider those things that are going to impact our citizens' lives, no matter where they are and what level of governing body it may be that is making the decisions, that we take those kinds of principles of environmental justice into consideration. Next slide. So Administrator McCarthy, earlier this year, back in September, announced some themes that she wanted to move forward as the new administrator. She said, we've got to meet the challenge ahead, and in doing so, she first wants to make a visible difference in our communities across the country. That's every corner of the country. Addressing climate change and improving air quality, next. Taking action on toxics and chemical safety. Protecting water, which we all recognize as a precious and limited resource, and it becomes much more so in extreme periods of drought. And I don't have to tell you that the Southwest and the Far West have been experiencing for a number of years some really significant challenges due to drought. Launching a new era of state, tribal, and local partners. Embracing EPA as a high-performing organization. And finally, working toward a sustainable future. So what is an environmental justice community? Well, there are some definitions, and you see them here. I'm not going to read verbatim everything that's there. But it can be a minority population that is meaningfully greater than the population of the state where the community is located. It's usually 20% more than the state's percentage, and those guidelines come from the Council for Environmental Quality, which is a Washington-based organization. It also can be a low-income community. And I feel like my presentation today dovetails very well with the presentation that the gentleman from the Health Department just gave you, because I saw a lot of interesting parallels in his presentation and what we're talking about here as it relates to environmental justice. The community may be plagued by one or more environmental problems affecting their health and the quality of life. And I can tell you that there are stressors that impact communities that are so designated, like food deserts, where you don't have a significant distribution of fresh fruits and vegetables, or you don't have adequate access to medical facilities, any number of stressors, in addition to the environmental stressors that may be at work. Some factors that may indicate a vulnerability for a community are those listed here. We sometimes hear and use the phrase fence line communities. There are communities that are adjacent to industrial operations, and they are very close in many cases, the proximity of those facilities to our communities. It can be something as simple as the language is different. English may not be the preferred or first choice language in some of these communities, and that can be an indicator of possible vulnerability for them. Lower educational attainment level. We all know how important and vital education is, but education, is something that we want to give everyone access to, and to make sure that people attain the best education they possibly can get. So how does our office, the Office of Environmental Justice and Tribal Affairs, assist our communities? We try to serve as troubleshooters, as liaisons. Mark's official title is EJ Liaison for Oklahoma. And I have a person for each of the 5 states that make up Region 6. So that's Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, New Mexico, and Louisiana. And I have one person on my staff identified to work with people and organizations, nonprofits, governmental, in each of those states. We work with state environmental departments. So the Office of the Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality is one of our partners, as is the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality and each of the environmental departments in each of our 5 states. So we work with them hand in hand. Many times referrals are made to us from those organizations to bring additional resources to bear on problems that are identified. We do a lot of dissemination of information because, as you might imagine, we have a wealth of other federal partners, HHSC, Health and Human Services, Housing and Urban Development, Department of Labor, Department of Education, a number of agencies, and we try to, where we can, bring as much of the information that those organizations may have at their disposal for use by our citizens to our citizens. Next slide, please. We also have a grant and training program. One of the things that we try to focus on in working with communities is to assess where they are in their evolution as neighborhood associations, as nonprofit organizations, community development groups, and to try and assist them in capacity building, creating young leaders who can continue to work maybe long after some of the senior folks who may have started those actions and activities have moved on. Some examples are listed here. I list Port Arthur, Texas. We've worked with communities all over our 5-state region to include areas within your state. Next slide. We assist EJ communities by promoting listening sessions, where we go out into the communities and conduct community meetings or public meetings. Last Saturday, I was over in Arkansas in a small community. At night, the meeting started at 5 and went on until about 8 that evening. And about 150 people came together to talk about issues of concern that they have in their community. We also have done training in alternative dispute resolution. We've tried to coordinate healthy homes trainings with our health partners and the Children's Health Program. The grants that we have are small, usually $20,000 to $25,000. So we're not talking about a huge amount of money. But most of the times, these grants are done to try to provide organizations on the ground, grassroots level, an opportunity to further educate or enhance the knowledge of their citizens. As you will recall, back during the British Petroleum oil spill down on the Gulf Coast, a lot of communities had a need to try to explain to their community residents what the impacts of that disaster had on their fishing industry, on their livelihood. And so we gave some of those grants. Like the same is true of hurricanes that have occurred, such as Rita and Katrina. And as far as I'm know, there may have been some recipients, for example, with your recent tornado in Moore, there may have been some grants that EPA was able to help out. So disasters are oftentimes places where we see some of our dollars put to use. Those grants are usually multimedia, meaning they'll cross the spectrum of air, water, waste needs. And they're always given to local organizations that are looking at dealing with issues on the ground in communities. Next slide. So, how can you as a council take this subject, environmental justice, into account in your work? Well, I think you've already indicated here this morning how you do that. You are aware of the special vulnerabilities that many of your communities have. Your health department talked about some of those challenges. And it was very, very exciting to hear those presentations that were given to you this morning. I've talked about the multiple stressors that are out there that impact people's lives day in and day out. There may be, as I said, special language needs. For example, down on the Gulf Coast, we have a lot of Vietnamese fishermen, both in Texas and in Louisiana. And if we go into those communities, sometimes we have to take Vietnamese speakers to be able to get our message across. The same is true sometimes in heavily Hispanic populated areas where Spanish is spoken. And we'll get contractors or people who speak that language to help us out. Now, these communities oftentimes are communities that have not had a long traditional history in political know-how and haven't been necessarily always involved in political life. And that's where the capacity building and development comes in. Sometimes they're distrustful of government and of government officials. And so we just have to recognize that. They're in some cases very poor communities. They don't have a lot of material resources. There are a lot of elderly in these communities with deep ties to the places that they reside in. And they often don't feel like they are a party to many of the decisions that get made that impact them. And they certainly sometimes are distrustful of people who come in from the outside. So we have to make sure, all of us do, when we're dealing with folks in these communities, but it's true across the board, no matter where you are, that we have to communicate in clear, concise, easy to understand language, that we approach our work in a very calm but not defensive manner with community people. Oftentimes, they're angry, they're upset, but they're not upset or angry with us. They don't like the situation they're in. They don't like what's happened. And so many times they're venting their displeasure with what's occurring to them. And I always say to folks, put yourself in their place. How would you feel if the situation was reversed? Next, please. So we try to provide as much information as we can. We try to be as transparent as we can. I think we owe it to people to also be realistic and practical and not to build false expectations. You know, to tell them realistically what can be done, what can be accomplished, but to make sure that they are armed with as much information as all of us can provide them that will help them in considering those decisions that are going to affect their lives and the environment that their children live, work, and the parents work and play, and the kids play in. I'd like for you all to remember that our team there at Dallas, Region 6, is always available to assist you in the assistance of your communities. I'll make sure I leave some of my business cards here with Ms. Martin. So if anyone of you would at any time in the future like to contact me or my staff, you'll have the contact information. And I think you already know that the environment, our health, the environmental health of all of our communities, not just our low-income, poor communities, but all of our communities, can be better protected going forward. And we can all do a better job in ensuring that the situation, the circumstances we leave our children, our grandchildren, are better than those that we inherited.
Right.
And with that, I'll just give you my contact information up there. And thank you very much for your attention. I'm prepared to answer any questions if you have them.
And Mr. Anderson, you're meeting with some of the department heads this afternoon.
Yes, we are. As I understand it, I'm going to be meeting with the planning staff, some of the planning staff, and the waste staff.
All right. Well, Director
Look forward to
Anderson,
that.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Very good information,
Appreciate it.
and thank you for your work. I can
Thank
tell
you,
it's a
sir.
real calling for you.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. John, thanks for your work on that committee as well, and bringing him in. All right. We're still on comments from council. Pat, do you have anything?
Nothing, all right, thank you.
John? Meg? David?
Well, unfortunately, I will be absent next week, and I'm just wanting to encourage everybody to take advantage of the activities for next Tuesday, April 22nd. I'm really looking forward to at least watching the presentations by television, the presentation by Dr. Blackburn and Jim Loftus about the history of Oklahoma City and just all the events, along with the opening of the Oklahoma City Arts Festival. Thank you.
Pete? Larry?
Some of you probably noticed that I was not here on time this morning. I had the opportunity to hear the mayor speak this morning, along with some other leaders at the annual Mayor's Prayer Breakfast that was held at the Myriad. Cox Center, excuse me. There were probably well over 1,000 people there. The whole thrust of that session was to promote good ethics and morality in business and politics, and I think it dovetailed very nicely with what was talked about earlier about the expenditure on gifts. So very good and very uplifting. Thank you, Your Honor.
James? All right. City manager reports. We've already had Gary, and you have one more item.
I do. Bob Tiener's here this morning to update us a little bit on some of the progress that's been made at the Development Center, particularly on building inspection. And I want to personally thank Bob and his staff for embracing the audit that was done a few months ago. The results, I think, have exceeded my expectations of what we can achieve. And I can tell you from, as I get out in the community, meeting with the development community and home builders and contractors, that they are very pleased with the increased productivity of the office.
Appreciate that. You may remember a year ago at my budget presentation, I said we were happy to receive the audit, but we knew it'd be a little painful. Well, it was a little painful, but we were able to get through all 21 recommendations. I'll just go through some of the highlights here. If you've looked at the report, you know, the graphs are a pretty good indication of how well we've been able to do. You know, basically what we tried to do, what this allowed us to do was kind of change the culture with the inspectors. And we gave them an expectation of a reasonable number of inspections to do in a day. We gave them a reasonable goal. We were able to show them that other communities did it in that same time frame, and they really bought into it. We changed some of our supervision, and that really helped. You know, some of the main things that we did, before, our inspectors would be in the office from 8 to 9:30, and then they'd come in at 4. Well, we changed the way we issued our inspections, and now they leave at 8 o'clock, and then they come in at 4:30 or 4. So we're able to get more man hours on the street, which helped us get more inspections done. And so, a couple other things, we issued phones for all the inspectors, so now before they go to an inspection, they contact the property owner. And that way, if they're not available, then we can go to the next inspection and not have to reject that inspection, which is a big thing that we've done. We also do a deal now where we meet with the different trades, meet with the plumbers, the electricians, heat and air guys, and we talk about the codes and the changes, so they're aware of how we're changing our inspections, and it's really helped. I went to the one with the plumbers about a month ago, and there were probably 75 to 100 people there, and they were all receptive, and they appreciated that we were there meeting with them and doing that. Just a couple of some statistics. Our goal was 80% do inspections 80% of the time within 2 days. Since July of 13, we've been at 92%, and through February, we're at 97%. So that's a pretty big deal. I can't remember when it was. In 2012, we were at 8 days out a couple of times, and it was kind of painful. One thing I have learned is I don't get the calls in my office now about people complaining about inspections. So that's a good thing. And one thing at that meeting, we have to tell them now, they used to schedule an inspection for 3 or 4 days out, even though the work wasn't done, just to get on the system. Now we have to tell them not to do that, because we'll be ready to inspect it in a day or two. So that's one change that we've done. That's really, one of the things in the audit, they asked us to look at our peer cities. So we surveyed all our peer cities by phone, and then we decided to send our development center manager and our chief to Tulsa and to Austin. And they went there and watched how they did it. One thing Austin does that we'll look at, their inspectors drive, they don't come into the office. Their inspections are issued on the computer, and they just drive. They park at the nearest city facility. That's where they go to their car, and they start from there. That saves them a lot of time. And we're really not ready to do that, but that's something that we'll look at. So you're really looking at the charts. One thing that will change in our LFR this July, we're going to have our goal is going to be inspections in 1 day 90% of the time. And the chart on the last page kind of shows where we're at. January and February this year, we kind of dropped under the 90%, but March we were back to 88%. You can just tell by, when I go down to the 8th floor and talk to the inspectors, it's just a different atmosphere. And, we appreciate the opportunity to be able to do this. And I also want to say that our other sections there, the permits and licensing and permit review, that we've improved our days out on our inspections. We've improved how long it takes us to get a permit reviewed, how long it takes you to get a license or a permit issued. So that entire division has done better, and a lot of it's based on this. So I know I kind of rambled there, but does anybody have any questions?
Just a comment. I used to have a lot of calls from developers in my ward, particularly about the inspections and the permits, getting plans approved, and I haven't had any for a while. And Bob, thank you for that.
I would make the same comment, Bob, really. I've had nothing but positive commentary about how things, and when we've had a bump in the road, your staff has been amazing to address it very quickly and very professionally. So thank you so much.
I appreciate that. We can't solve them all, but we're doing a lot better. And
We appreciate your work. Thanks, man. Jim, you're still in city manager reports.
That's it, sir.
Okay. Citizens to be heard. No one has signed up. Is there anyone here hoping to speak under citizens to be heard? Okay. And before we adjourned on item 8B, where there was some confusion about whether or not it had been denied.
Kenny Jordan briefed me that he and Francis and Dan Brummett met in the back room and decided that it has been denied.
Okay. And with that, we will adjourn.